Our worst day.
Okay.
This is AP News.
Okay, keep talking, Darius.
Britain's King Charles is in Germany. This is his first foreign trip since becoming
Okay.
King Charles
Just let me know if I'm up yet.
His tour starts
We'll see.
in Germany. Charles's first trip as Britain's
I can hear it now. It sounds great.
Okay, great.
Palace Bellevue, the German president's official residence. The king says the relationship between Germany and the United Kingdom matters greatly to him.
I can only assure you that throughout the time that is granted to me as king, I will do all I can to strengthen connections between us.
The king switched from English to near flawless German.
Sehr geehrter Herr Bundespräsident,
He said he's convinced the ties between Germany and Britain will become even stronger. The king hopes to improve the UK's relations with the European Union and show he can be influential on the world stage, just like his mother, Queen Elizabeth. I'm Ed Donahue.
And I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now,
Hey, everybody, going to have Paul Vallis on the show today.
From the Weatherology Weather Center.
And going to go see Bernie Sanders tonight.
Ski. Partial sunshine.
So all in all, it should be a great day.
Winds out of the southeast around 5 to 10 miles per hour, gusting as high as 20. And then for tonight, a chance for showers and thunderstorms here late. Cloudy skies, a low near 51. Friday, a chance for showers and storms. Cloudy skies, a high of 64 degrees. Saturday, chance for rain and snow mixing early, becoming all rain late. Cloudy, high of 42. That's your latest Chicago weather update.
Currently, it's 28.
Crime is getting worse. We call 911 and no one comes. Last year, over 21,000 high-priority 911 calls took more than an hour before a police officer was dispatched. West and South Side neighborhoods suffered the most. Now Brandon Johnson wants to cut the police department by millions of dollars, making our neighborhoods even less safe. We need a mayor who puts our safety first and invests in us. Paul Vallis. Paul Vallis will make sure our police department is fully staffed with community policing in our neighborhoods, so we know the officers serving our neighborhoods and they know our community. Paul Vallis will enforce the consent decree and hold the police and City Hall accountable. Paul will keep schools open weekends and all summer to provide our kids safe alternatives to gangs and violence and invest in our long-neglected communities to provide jobs and opportunity.
911, what's your emergency?
Paul Vallis will put crime and your safety first. Paid for by Vallis for Mayor.
Hi, this is Joan Esposito. Please join us on Tuesday, April 4th for WCPT's Chicago mayoral election coverage. Santita Jackson, Patty Vasquez will be giving you the latest updated election results of the Chicago mayor's race and the latest on the 14 aldermanic runoff races. This is one of the most important City of Chicago elections in our lifetime. We'll be live from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. with updates and, as soon as they come in, results from all over the city. WCPT's election coverage is sponsored by Fazio Insurance, an independent insurance agency serving residents and businesses in Will and DuPage counties since 1953. Whether you're in the market for a new policy or need to update a policy, their licensed insurance agents are here to help you every step of the way. For more information, contact Paul Fazio at 815-727-2611 or at fazioinsurance.com.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Hi.
We have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much.
I love gymnastics, piano, public speaking, and riding on the trail bike with my dad. You can help me live the life I want.
Help Ravina and other blind people by making a tax-deductible donation of your used car, truck, or almost anything with wheels to the National Federation of the Blind. Your donation will help ensure a brighter future for blind children and adults. Just call 855-659-9314. That's 855-659-9314. Or visit carshelpingtheblind.org. That's carshelpingtheblind.org. We will arrange to have the donated vehicle picked up and provide you with a tax-deductible receipt. And if you know someone who is blind that can use our help,
Got that.
email NFB.
Hey, everybody, today we will be talking with Paul Vallis, and I'm going to have a panel to to talk about the mayoral race before and to react to his appearance on the show after. We're going to have Brandon Johnson, not today. We're going to have him in the next day or so, firming that up.
Loud noises would.
I'm going to go see Bernie Sanders tonight, so I should be covering the waterfront, huh?
Finally said to him.
And Mr. Vallis will be on once again on the Santita Jackson Show next week, just before the election. So I'm glad about that, and I thank him for that.
Drinking more or increased anger.
And so there's that.
But help is available.
Dad finally went to VA for one-on-one and group therapy and got some.
So okay.
To manage things. I got my dad back.
Listen to hundreds of inspiring stories at maketheconnection.net and learn how you can support the veterans in your life. Treatment works. Recovery is possible.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. All right, let the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Let us have a great show. Let us have a great show. Let us have a great show. All right, everybody.
More than 6,000 people lose their lives to sarcoma each year. Treatment options for sarcoma are limited, and new therapies are desperately needed. More research and an increased awareness is necessary to fight
30 seconds.
cancer that you probably didn't even know existed until now. Through awareness, advocacy, and research, the Sarcoma Foundation of America is determined to help those affected by this forgotten cancer, to bring hope to the children and adults whose lives are forever changed by a word they had never heard before. Please help us in the fight
10 seconds.
for sarcoma. For more information on sarcoma and the work
All
of
right,
the
Alex, let's have a
Stand by.
great show. All right.
please go to curesarcoma.org.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today, getting a little bit of feedback. Going to work on that. Hey, we're going to have Paul Vallis on with us today. Want to give him some runway so that he can tell us what he plans to do for the city of Chicago, and maybe there's something that we've missed, and if there's anything we've missed, we want him to say it on this show. Have a couple of questions for him, but want to give him the runway to really to tell you who he is. And then we're going to have a panel on before and after Mr. Vallis to talk about this election. It is tighter than this. All one word, everybody. Tighter than this. And so we need to talk about the undecideds. There is nothing that is carved in stone with this election. Nothing at all. And in fact, the Vallis campaign is saying that things will not be decided on election night, which kind of moves into the territory of where some of his supporters have been. They feel that this election will be stolen, but then too, it takes time to count these votes. You've got absentee ballots and all of that, and because the race is so tight, it is conceivable that it might take a day or so in order for this to happen, but in order for us to find out who will be the new mayor. But I want to hear from you. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, and everybody like and share. Meet my morning stars here on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and the Santita Jackson Show on YouTube, and the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. That is where you can reach me on Facebook, no place else. Santita Jackson and Friends. So let's get right to it, everybody. In Chicago, it's going to be almost spring-like, 50 degrees and cloudy. Minneapolis, 39 degrees, rain and snow. In the NBA, the Lakers 121, the Bulls 110, the Suns 107, the Timberwolves 100. In the NHL, the Blues will be facing off against Chicago, and the Wild are triumphant over the Avalanche. Breaking news, there has been a Wall Street journalist who's being detained by Russia. Russia's security service said just today that it has detained Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gerskovich a U.S. citizen on charges of espionage in the interests of the American government. The Russian Federation Security Service alleged that he collected information, quote, constituting a state secret about the activities of one of the enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex. He recently reported on the war in Ukraine and the role played by the Russian paramilitary group Wagner, whose founder told the Daily Beast that he had not heard of the journalist's arrest. We will be continuing to follow that story. In the meantime, more and more of these tech titans are saying that there are warnings of the dangers of artificial intelligence. Dozens of tech leaders, including Elon Musk, signed a letter calling for artificial intelligence labs to stop developing powerful AI systems for at least 6 months, citing, quote, profound risks to society and humanity, close quote. The letter comes just weeks after OpenAI announced GPT-4, an even more powerful version of the technology that underpins the AI chatbot tool, ChatGPT. In early tests, that technology was able to draft lawsuits, pass exams, and build a working website from a hand-drawn sketch, and it can sound just like you. Unbelievable, everybody. Grief-stricken Nashville residents came together for a citywide vigil yesterday to mourn 3 9-year-old children and 3 adults killed in the mass shooting at a private Christian school. First Lady Jill Biden, although she did not speak, was also in attendance at a community as the community members mourned and honored the victims with prayers and songs, and the great Sheryl Crow sang there as well. As the city struggles to process the tragedy, more details are emerging about how the shooting unfolded, and indeed we're finding that the shooter had paramilitary training. Can't wait to follow up and find out about that. As Russia's Wagner mercenary group continues to suffer major losses in the key area of Bakhmut, Ukraine's defense minister said on Wednesday the Western tanks will likely be deployed as early as next month. German Leopold tanks, which have begun arriving in Ukraine, will be part of a counterintelligence campaign in April or May. The Senate on Wednesday voted to end the national COVID-19 emergency declared by then-President Donald Trump in March of 2020. The final vote was overwhelmingly bipartisan, 68-23. The joint resolution, which cleared the House earlier this year, now heads to President Biden's desk. Do you think that the pandemic is over, everybody, or are we just over it? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773 WCPT. Paul Vallis at the top of the next hour on the Santita Jackson Show. But I want to hear from you. What do you expect to hear from him? Who do you think is going to win? Or will you be making up your mind when you go into the voting booth? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. And because both candidates have said no more debates, we will not be having a debate, WCPT, tomorrow. So you guys who won the tickets, hold on to those tickets, but keep it right here because we're going to have wall-to-wall coverage on Tuesday night. And Jonas Esposito is going to be interviewing Paul Vallis and Brandon Johnson, as will I. And so just keep it locked on these shows. Patty Vasquez, keep it locked on these shows because we'll be interviewing all of these candidates and alders and talking to everybody. So, and talking to you because, after all, you're the one who's going to make the decision. Pastor Darius Brooks. That's right. We just love you, Pastor Brooks. How are you doing today?
We are great. I am great. I pray that you guys are great. I pray that God is your source always. He's still our strength. And he ain't changed. And he's going to do what he's going to do.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love, of course, Grace Central Church in Westchester, Illinois. As you get into the good news very quickly, you have been giving out thousands and thousands of bags of groceries to people. How can people get in line and get their groceries? No matter what it looks like, we all know that people are struggling out here. Pastor, when do you give away this food?
Great Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. That's right off of 290 in Manheim. Every Tuesday from 5 to 7. And on Wednesdays for seniors from noon to 2. In Santita, we give $200 to $300 worth of food. We all share alike. I'm learning that a lot of us don't share share things, and you never know who's really needing things. Just because you don't need it doesn't mean someone else don't need it. Santita, they are around the corner. As a matter of fact, it's a production in Grace Central for real. As a matter of fact, I get excited about going to see what's being done. I roll up my sleeves as a pastor. I get the moving boxes. It's almost like a joy now. It's we got to really do it. But first it was we just looking to do something. Oh, we blessing people, Santita. Now it's a passion.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy amazing. I love giving, and if you ever want to know who God is, Santita, I will tell you a secret that I've learned. You got to get this. If you don't, love is giving, it's not receiving. Did you hear what I said? Yes, Santita, love is giving, is not receiving. And that revelation is crazy amazing. Great Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois, every Tuesday from 5 to 7. We feed 8 different communities, and if you come by, we're going to feed you too. And on Wednesdays from noon till 2. Santita, let's journey through the good news. 1 Corinthians 2, 8, and 10. 1 Corinthians 2, 8, and 10. Santita, I love the Word of God. Girl, I read and I study it every day. It's a lamp unto my feet. It's a light.
Dr. Knighton is not responding.
I study it for 411, not 911. Often we go to God and we're sick. You study before. He's a 411 kind of God. He's not a 911 kind of God. He's going to answer you in that 911 situation. But an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. 1 Corinthians 2, 8, and 10, which none of the rulers of this age knew. Santita, I'm about to run up out of my house. For had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But it is written, I had not seen, nor neither have they heard, neither entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for those who love him. Santita 11 says, but God has revealed to them, to us, through his Spirit. For what Spirit searches all things? Yes, the deep things of God. For what man knows the things of a man except the Spirit of the man which is in him? Even so, no one knows the things of God except the Spirit of God. Santita, if I wanted to use a thought today, people of God, I use the thought, don't give to that light. Don't give to that light. And Santita, the scripture is talking about how I know how the rulers, if they'd have known who God was, just like right now, people in position that people know really have a heart for people in government. There's politics, we do politics, and they're public servants who really have the public's interest at heart. Now, they both live in the same house. They both deal with the same situations, but their intent is different. Santita is like David and Saul. Saul was wicked. David was weak. And studying God's words, he says, for those who know the difference, you got to know the difference, because I haven't seen, neither have it heard, neither have it entered into the heart of man the things God has prepared for them that love him. In other words, God got an outcome no matter what it looks like to you if you trust his direction in your life. Santita, contrary,
Dr. Knighton is on.
God's word will not push you beyond what you are able to bear. Although often you will be challenged beyond your comfort zone, you can be confident of this. When God calls you to something, to share your pain, it is not to cause you more hurt. It is to open you up to a new pathway of strength and principles. Santita, listen to me. God stops growth where there is no stewardship. He cannot connect to where his strength or his word is. I hope somebody's hearing me. Yes, he does. God stops growth where there is no stewardship. It's like no oxygen getting to the lungs. It's like no blood getting to the heart. It's like you don't pay your mortgage. Where there's no stewardship, people of God, it stops. It's just like your teeth. If you don't take care of your teeth, they're going to go away. When you trust God in its totality and put your heart in his word for real, not just a religious position, Santita, Paul wrote, we never give up Though our bodies are dying, our spirits are being renewed day by day. For our present troubles are small and won't last very long. Yet they produce for us a greater glory that vastly outweighs everything that's trying to inhibit us from being our very best, because God's word will last forever. As I close, all kinds of opportunities will come. But the ones that God gives, Santita, are mind-blowing. You may not see right now what God is doing or your gift, and that's okay. Just keep your eyes open, that when you approach God's word in this world with a readiness and a relentlessness to know that you're going to hear from God, you'll be open to the voice of the Holy Spirit. Here, you don't police the word, you live the word, which is where he speaks to his sheep. My sheep know my voice, and the stranger they will not follow. Anything outside of God's word, I tell Grace Central, if it ain't in his word, don't let it be heard. And if it ain't in his word, don't live that life.
Amen. Pastor Darius Brooks, Grace Central, everybody. Please go to that church, check them out. You can get fed, not just spiritually, but you can get some physical food, which we all need. We love you, Pastor Darius Brooks. Love you, love you, love you so much. Grace Central, everybody, in Westchester, Illinois. Love you, Jarius. We've got Dr. Shanina Knighton on with us, of course. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. That is her handle on social media. And, of course, I have a question for you this morning about COVID-19. The Senate yesterday voted to end the national COVID-19 emergency declared by President Trump in March of 2020. It was a partisan vote, 68 to 23, overwhelming. Well, it was actually overwhelmingly bipartisan. But that having been said, the president said he strongly opposes this bill. And I'm just wondering, what do you think about it? Because it seems like, most people who are in the hospitals today who have COVID have had the vaccinations, they've been boosted. COVID is still real, but so are other illnesses. But, you have politicians, publicly elected officials who've determined that this is over. Let us move forward. And businesses, more than that, are saying this is over. Let us move forward. What do you think about that as an infection preventionist?
So I think one of the things that concerns me is that while everything is ending, there is a lack of legislation and structure for what it is businesses as well as individuals should still be doing when it comes to infection prevention and control. We know that COVID is still wreaking havoc, and the fact that we know the long-term effects of COVID is a real thing, just like we also know that people are still being sick, people are still dying, and what things are intended to reduce symptoms, there's still a lack of understanding fully around who is most affected versus who is not. So I think we still leave this situation with more questions than we have answers. So what I do hope, which I'm not completely 100% sure of, is that the dollars are actually shifting and potentially going into research to help us understand some of these problems, opposed to thinking that we have the solution. For example, I mention all the time, Santita, if just as many resources was put into infection prevention and control, specifically around hand hygiene, making sure that, let's say, businesses and facilities had hand hygiene materials, not just masks, as you know there was an emphasis on masks, but some of these other essential things that are needed, then we do ask ourselves, would things have been different? We also ask, when we talk about education, continue to emphasize this, because you and I both know that individuals are really quick to say masks don't work. But have we done enough, and did we have enough funding to be able to support education campaigns around correct mask wearing, which includes hand hygiene before and after, and not wearing it beneath your nose? So what I do hope is that it is a shifting of funds, that even though the emergency is declared over, that there's also bills that are supporting infection prevention and control practices, because one of the things that concern me is that we may not necessarily be ready for the next pandemic. And unfortunately, there will be one. because we had H1N1. We never know the severity of them, but we know that they're coming, especially as our environment continues to change, especially if we continue to face antibiotic-resistant organisms, which I know we've talked about recently, Candida auris, which is in the news. But my running words are always, if you don't hear about a pathogen, which is the deadly germ, then that is because individuals such as infectious disease doctors, epidemiologists, infection preventionists, and the healthcare workers that are working hard to prevent them are doing their job. But unfortunately, with the challenges that we face with healthcare shortages, with lack of funding dollars, it is a possibility, a high possibility, that we want to stay ready so we don't have to get ready, which means that legislation should support people incorporating infection prevention and control into their daily lives.
Amen to that. I mean, and let's come up with a health care plan, like universal single payer. This is what I'm saying. That will cover all Americans. I cannot believe that we came through a pandemic with so many people who are uninsured and who are profoundly underinsured, that we've not had that discussion. I mean, we've missed all of these discussions. Everybody was trying to get a shot like we take pills instead of getting to the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter is that most Americans do not have a system that cares for their health, let alone health care. That's got to stop. We've got to have a health care system that covers everybody, because you saw from COVID that when one person's got it, everybody's got it, potentially. Dr. Shanina Knighton, everybody. Hey, Dr. Nina, Heydrnina. Of course, she's on social media. Stay right there. Follow her so you can get the best advice. Let's talk about this mayoral election. Got Paul Vallis coming on at the top of the hour. What do you want to hear from him? What do you want to hear from Brandon Johnson? Will be coming on in another day or so. What do you need in this new mayor? I hope that you're voting. You can vote in all 50 wards. That's right. Same day on-site voter registration. If you're not registered to vote, if you feel inspired to vote now, you can go on and do it. Tell your high school students who will be 18 by Tuesday, get over and vote. Get registered and vote. Make sure the seniors, make sure the infirmed and the ill, make sure that they vote, and call Rainbow Push if you have any trouble voting. 773-FREEDOM. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Dr. Knighton, how are you?
I'm good. You know, like it's around that school hour, so these kids got me in here whipping up pancakes this morning.
Oh, bless your heart. Okay. Oh.
And they so spoiled. They ain't just want any kind, you know, because I thought about just using it out the box. But they like, Mom, I want blueberries. Now they got me in here crushing up blueberries and making pancakes.
See, my mother was so creative. When she did make breakfast, she wanted to make a breakfast. Belgian waffles and things like that. We were like, Mom, we're going to be late for school. And I got up early to make these waffles for you. Oh, I said when she was moved to do that. That is not her thing, but it was hilarious. You were like, this looks delicious, but I got to get to school. Got to hurry up. You better sit down and eat that stuff. Oh, gosh.
Reverend Wilson is on.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Reverend Wilson. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Great, great, great. Great, great, great. Great hearing your voice. And, of course, you're talking with Dr. Shanina Knighton. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Since the Senate has just voted that the COVID-19 emergency is over now.
Right.
Well, it's a business decision. People want you to get back to work. They don't want to talk about this anymore. But it leads me to wonder about the decision to close everything down in the first place, because everything was not closed down everywhere. And that's true. You know, I mean, prep schools kept on going. And, you know, the wealthy kept on going. It was the poor who were locked up, and most people in the world today are working and working poor. And they were able to do a reset economically. Yep, I'm not thinking conspiratorially. People plan, everybody. And we need to be clear on that.
Well, and some people have the resources to do effective planning.
Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying the powers that be plan. And they got
absolutely.
they got a
They
plan for us.
10 years and 20 years out.
Mm-hmm. They got a plan for us.
Yep.
Okay, let me send you this.
Absolutely.
Let me send you Reeves. Okay.
Reverend Thurston is on.
I'm about to send you this number right now.
I couldn't get a hold of G2 Brown. I will try again, and I couldn't get a hold of Shapiro Wells.
Okay, no worries. We're going to keep this going. I just sent you Dr. Reeves.
Okay, I will call her shortly.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, very good. So we can get right to it. Okay.
1 minute.
Paul will keep schools open weekends and all summer to provide our kids safe alternatives to gangs and violence and invest in our long-neglected communities to provide jobs and opportunity. 911, what's your emergency? Paul Vallis will put crime and their safety first. Paid for by Vallis.
Who else is going to be on?
30 seconds.
Hold on one moment. G2 Brown. You all will be on for this block. Then I'm going to pivot to Mr. Vallis. Then I'm going to pivot to another group. It was Anjanette Young, right?
Yes.
Whew. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. So you set the table for us. Give you a couple of minutes for that. We're going to get everybody else on.
10
Dr.
seconds.
Reeves, of course, will be on talking about education. I really want her
Stand by.
to, thank you, get to know you.
Absolutely.
I will.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's election season, everybody. On April 4th, we will be having a big election here in Chicago. Who will comprise the new city council? Who will be our new mayor? Indeed, Paul Vallis' team says, look, we probably won't know who the new mayor will be on the night of April the 4th, which of course is the date of the last day for you to vote. Interestingly enough, that is 55 years to the day of the assassination, the murder of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Vote as you think about him, as you think about his life, vote. Indeed, that was one of his crowning achievements, the right to vote, affirming that. So everybody, what do you think? What do you think? Who you got in this race? A chunk of Chicagoans are still undecided. So what does that mean? But then there are a chunk of Chicagoans who are not even being measured. Indeed, the presiding bishop of the Church of God in Christ International, Bishop J. Drew Sheard, that's right, married to Karen Clark Sheard of the iconic Clark sisters. I mean, those are the singingest women in the world. Indeed, their grandmother really is one of the founders of modern gospel music. Everyone loves and admires them. Well, it's the largest denomination of black churchgoers in the world, 17 million people. He came out and endorsed Brandon Johnson yesterday. So what will that mean? That's going to mean a lot. I think it's going to mean a lot. And yeah, people are not polling them. So we're going to have to see how this is all going to work. We're going to bring together our panel as we are still comprising them, but I want to hear from you, everybody. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. We're going to have G2 Brown on with us shortly. We will have, we've got you, Reverend Doctor, Attorney. I've got a whole lot of labels for you, and they're all true. Jeanette Wilson, talk to me. What does this? What do you see in this election, very quickly, and what does it mean to have the presiding bishop of the Church of God in Christ endorse Brandon Johnson?
Well, I think there are several factors. This is a rather close election. People are confused because they're beginning for the first time, I think, to weigh all of what it means to elect a mayor. Oftentimes, we're just gone by popular personalities, not really focused on the power of the office and the issues that the office would be called to address. And I think coming out of COVID has given people a new focus on health care, how we're going to educate our children, how we're going to deal with inequities. To have the presiding bishop of the Church of God in Christ,
Mr. Brown is on.
only religious leader of note to endorse Church of God in Christ in the city of Chicago will be more focused on getting out the vote than ever before. You had the former international bishop of the Apostolic Assemblies of God, and that is in Bishop Horace Smith, endorsed. And then you also had the local bishop, regional Midwest. He'd almost like be over the Midwest, presiding bishop of the 4th Episcopal District of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. For all of them to come out and push Brandon Johnson and pray for him, it was an unprecedented moment. We have not had that kind of showing of faith leaders in the last 30 years.
Really, since Reverend
like
ran, right?
Yeah, so it's my 40 years, 40 plus years. And, I mean, it was just an unusual moment to be at Bishop Ford's church, who was perhaps the most political leader in the Church of God in Christ ever. More black judges were on the bench because of the work and efforts of Bishop Henry Louis Ford. And so when you look at all of the faith leaders, and then you see a coming together of a national focus on Chicago again. We've not had that kind of focus since Reverend ran for president and late Mayor Washington ran for the office. So I think people are beginning to have a sense of this is an important election for us. And everything is at stake. You know, safety is at issue. And people are now beginning to wonder, how do we address it? It's not enough to have police because many of the people, as we saw in Nashville, committing these crimes have mental illnesses that are no longer being addressed. They don't have community mental health centers to go to. It's just a lot of issues.
And military training. I mean, this child had, this young person had military training. So they just, you know, because sick people, mentally ill people hurt themselves. Angry people hurt other people. They need to stop sticking that on mentally ill people because it's not true, and it just continues to demonize and put them in a corner. But, you know, I want to move things around, Reverend, because I want you to put a button on that because we got G2 Brown on, we've got Dr. Marnie Reeves, and I want to hear what their thoughts are, too. But, I mean, you were painting for us, really. I think that you would need to be from deep inside of the black culture to understand what our pastors mean to us. I think that everybody, you know, in their own cultures, your pastors mean a great deal to you, your religious figures, but you have the Pope, we've got our bishops, we've got our big ministers, we esteem them as greatly. So when they come out and endorse these candidates, they don't do it, they do it, they make these judicious decisions and they pray over it. And their members know that, and it's a big, big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Before you go to your other palace, and these are not pastors that have a need for a mayor to provide them with financial contributions. Anything. These are independent in the tradition of Reverend Clay Evans. I mean, I let my building stand 7 years, he said, because I believe in this principle. I'm not going to bow. Dr. King can come to my church. I'm talking about Reverend Evans and fellowship. So these are, when those guys step up and speak out, that's a shift. And people begin to see, wait a minute, this is not the normal position we've been in trying to vote for a mayor.
Absolutely.
And I think it's just a powerful moment for us.
Absolutely, absolutely.
In Chicago.
Absolutely. We've got Dr. Marnie Reeves with us, of course, from the City University of New York. She teaches there as well as the New York City Public Schools. And, of course, she has been a union leader. We're so excited that she is with us today. And we have got G2 Brown. Let me pivot to you, Mr. Brown. What do you make of this election? I mean, now we're hearing, the Vallis campaign is saying, look, things won't be decided more than likely on Tuesday night. Of course, you've got absentee ballots, but the race is really close, according to the polls. But then we heard this in 1983, and Harold Washington shocked the world because our people are not polled. Our souls just went to the polls and voted for him. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is a critical moment. First, thank you, Ms. Jackson, for having me this morning and providing the platform, for our voices. I think it's a critical moment. I think Black Chicago is at a crossroad where we have a city that welcomes our people back, or where we have a city that purges us from Chicago. And, the purging of Black people from Chicago is really just on the sabotage of our basic quality of life institutions. So if you can't afford the housing, if your child doesn't have a decent school to go to, if there's no economic opportunity, then people, find ways to go where they can live. And we have to realize that in the year 2000, we were still considered a soul city. And by soul city, I mean a majority Black city. Like Baltimore, D.C., et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that is over.
23 years later. Yes, ma'am. 23 years later, we are only 30% of the population. It is not, and I want to stop using the word gentrification, because it takes the intent off of it. It is a purge. And the common denominator has been the loss of affordable housing and the loss of education opportunity. Parents want to be able to put their child's backpack on and send them to a good school down the street from their home. That has been robbed, snatched from Black Chicago. And so I think we cannot have short memories. We have to remember why our young people are in the condition they're in right now.
Yes, Reverend Thurston is on.
A society that does not invest in its young people betrays its young people. And from the work that I've been blessed to do, I remember when there were no summer jobs. I remember when schools were put on academic probation and you had to narrow the students' curriculum. You had to do, the children were in basically testing factories. I was in those schools and I saw the lights go out in the young people's eyes. And that was Paul Vallis. And all Arnie Duncan had to do was swing the axe.
Well,
that's all he had to do.
Well, it seems that it is a corporate decision to corporatize everything. I mean, you see people in South and Central America fighting to hold on to water. I mean, it's as crazy as that sounds. And I think we need to understand, what's happening as you are painting the picture for us in Chicago and all around the world, which is why you see people pushing back, and we have to do that. Because the poor, it's Black people today, it's going to be brown people tomorrow, and poor white people the next day. If you are not affluent, you are not going to be able to stay in this city. And that's just, or in any city. And that's a horrible thing. You see it in Tokyo, you see it everywhere. You see it in Johannesburg, you see it all over the world, you see it in London, you see it. We got to look at that and deal with that, G2 Brown. Let me just pivot all the way around. Let me go to you, Reverend Stephen Thurston, New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church. Talk to me. We've had these iconic figures from the church who are endorsing Brandon Johnson, and we're hearing that the race will not be decided in all likelihood on Tuesday night because so many people are undecided, and maybe they're expecting a surge in voting. What do you see? What do you see as this race continues, as it heats up, as we move forward? It's just continuing to heat up.
Yeah. I see the opportunity extended for us to continue to educate those undecided voters. Your show and other people who are bringing valid sources to the table to put forth information. The article that you shared with me the other day that runs the receipts of Paul Vallis and shows a revisionist history that he and his campaign continue to report that he has to be accountable for, and close the gap between what he says happened and what the facts and the data say happened. And so these individuals who are undecided really need to dig deep on both candidates, get the insight, do some history research as well, recognizing that like tough on crime policies aren't really tough on crime, they're tough on people. It's an emotionally satisfying proposition, but objectively it's useless. Because every politician that talks about tough on crime, more police, follows another politician who said the same thing, but there's no evidence or no record that ever worked. What has worked in other cities is investment in the community, investment in neighborhood. And if we want to get something that we've never gotten before, we got to do something we've never done before. We've funded police departments to the hilt. We've not funded our communities to the hilt. There's only one candidate that's talking like that. And so candidates have to be challenged on facts and not just feelings.
Well, I hear you because, we talk about defunding the police. Everyone is up in arms about that, but no one's talking about the defunding of the public schools. It's just, that just happened, and we don't even think about it. It was supposed to happen because they don't produce great results. That is not true. It is absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. Dr. Marnie Reeves. And of course, as someone who teaches in the New York public schools, and you are developing a national voice with the unions, and you teach in the public schools, Mr. Brown and Reverend Thurston and Reverend Wilson. She teaches in the City University of New York system, and she teaches in the public schools. So she gets our kids ready to go to college and gets them in and then gets them out, which is, really unique. Why is this race of such national consequence? Because people all over are talking about this, and more, quite frankly, teachers are running for elective office. What's going on?
Well, one of the things that we're seeing in our good morning, everyone. I'm sorry. Thank you for having me on your show, Santita.
Of course.
One of the things that we're seeing is that because we're taking funding from public schools and giving them to charter schools, we have educators who are standing up and saying now we need to really come together and have a voice for our children. Because what we're finding is that when we're opening up charter schools and we're handing out vouchers to some kids with the intention of truly denying them their fundamental right to free education, equitable education, we have some kids who are getting and some kids who are not. We have some kids who are targeted and limited to the equality in education that they should be getting. We now have teachers who are saying, okay, this much and no farther, because we cannot stand by and allow businesses to speak for education when they're not truly investing in education. We cannot have the corporatocracy telling us how, when, where, and why to educate our kids without involving educators. So when someone like Brandon Johnson, who has stood up for equality in education in Chicago for so many years, who has stood before our children and educated them and prepared them for the world, is now standing up to say, I want to be mayor of this city because I believe in this city. I believe in the people. I believe in the children as the future. We need to take heed because we're not seeing that. We're not seeing, a lot of educators being listened to. We're not seeing a lot of educators being acknowledged for the work that they've done over the years. Someone like Brandon Johnson, who has been on the pavement, making sure that our children are getting a fair shake out of this system. And like many educators who would take out of their own pockets to ensure that children get supplies. right? Meanwhile, the corporatocracy is saying, let's remove funding from public schools, give it to charter schools, because the assumption is they're better. But who are these people who we're looking at, like the Paul Vallises of the world? He has never set foot in the classroom. Has he ever had a conversation with an educator to say, what do you need and how can I help you to get there? If he had, then he would not have done a lot of the things he has done in cities like Philadelphia, where while he was leading that city as superintendent, you had 30,000 children drop out of those schools. If he had, he would not have gone into a place like Haiti after the earthquake to say, you know what, I see an opportunity here. I can actually taste it without really deciding I'm going to really make an investment in this community to help develop, help regrow, help the children. After 300,000 of those children were displaced from schools, he would not have gone into Connecticut and felt that he could lead the public school system there in Bridgeport when he did not have the credentials to be in that position to begin with. So when we see somebody like a Brandon Johnson who really understands, because remember, as educators, we are the nurturers of the children. We are in close contact with the parents, so we understand what's going on both inside the classroom with our students and outside of the classroom with their parents when they're on the street. We're very close to the ground in that way. So someone like a Brandon Johnson should be put in a position as mayor because they understand the people. He understands the people. Not a Paul Vallis who's sitting up in the C-suite, not truly understanding what's going on the ground and doesn't care to understand until he's willing to run for office. See, I can say, very proudly, as an educator, that I would rather know that I have someone who's been fighting all these years for equity in education, for my children, for the community, to be in that position than someone who only shows up when he thinks he wants to be in office.
But hold that thought.
We really have to look at that.
But hold that thought. Reverend Wilson, why don't you respond to that?
Well, let me say this. I think, one, Paul Vallis was hired from each of these cities, including Chicago. The mayor, this is why I am personally supporting Brandon. The mayor had the power to make a decision about how that school system would operate. Paul was merely a hired gun. Follow the money. You do what you're paid to do. I'm not justifying what he did. He was hired by Mayor Daley when Chicago public schools were, at that time, labeled the worst school in the nation. And he came in based on a corporate model. And I keep thinking we're overlooking these corporations run our cities. They run our school system. There's a group called the Civic Consulting Alliance. They give every mayor that goes into office a plan, an agenda to follow. They provide research and data. They are shifting cities, as Santita suggested, all over the world, but certainly all over America, to follow a corporate model. And so when we think about electing a mayor, we also have to have an agenda, and we have to get that mayor to run and be aware that they have to remain committed to the community that put them in, as opposed to listening to and being controlled by the voices of corporations, because it's all about business. It's all about the bottom line. And Paul Vallis is not the worst man in the world. He is a white man who decided to use his privilege to run for an office that the highest office in the city. He has been working for mayors before and did what they directed him to do.
But to be fair,
we have an opportunity.
You got black folks who are in this too, right? So,
absolutely.
Because no, let me just say this, because you have black folks of privilege. And I mean, I think everyone should have the right to support whomever they choose. But I think we have to be clear that this really, race and racism is in it. But it goes beyond that. It really goes to privilege because people become adjacent to power. They don't even get it. They become adjacent to it, and then they become wedded to it. I want to get a couple more people in before we go to this break, and I welcome Mr. Vallis to the show. Before you go, Reverend Thurston, I mean, what do you see? I mean, what do you see? Is the race this tight? Do you see about 10% of folks undecided? You know, as we have all of these things going around us, everyone is talking about, you know, the corporatization of our lives. It's even happening with COVID. You have the senators are not doctors in the main. They decided, because corporations are squeezing them, that COVID's over. Next. What are we looking at? They did it yet? They voted yesterday, 68 to 23.
Yeah. We're looking at a tight race that's going to be dependent upon black people getting out to vote. If black people get out to vote, it's clear who's going to be on the fifth floor.
Do you think they'll do it?
We will do it. Let's just keep pushing our people. Put the pressure on. I think they'll surprise us and come on out.
Okay, just very quickly, what will you say to these young people? What will you say to your congregations, plural, to get people out to vote? 1 minute.
We have to look beyond the present to the future. What is the city going to look like 5-10 years from now? The decisions that we make on April 4th will have a ripple effect in so many ways. You have to be a part of that process. It goes beyond social media posts and videos to you actually using the voice that has power, and that's your vote. Get in that booth, make a difference, make a change, and set the stage for your future. Because this all depends upon us as young people carrying the weight that our seasoned citizens have been carrying for so long. It's our turn and it's our time.
Voting is important. 30 seconds for you, Reverend Wilson.
We have to look past our individual pain and look to say, how do we want our city to look? How do we want to invest after we get past the loop and the magnificent mile? How do we want our schools to look? Who do we think can take us to the next level? How do we want to see our city viewed around the world? How do we want to address some of the issues we have in community? How are we going to empower our children to keep away from gangs and see a brighter future for themselves? And who do we think can do that? Who can reinvest in neighborhoods and reinvest in the hearts and minds of our children? Who can expand our school system so that we're a global city and not a local community?
Everybody get out and vote.
Got to vote about it.
Got to vote about it. Same day on-site voter registration. Paul Vallis coming up on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Thank you, Reverend Thurston. Thank you, Reverend Wilson.
Thank you, Santita.
Thank you. Oh, boy. I'm running. Today. Oh, my gosh. And then we've got Bernie Sanders tonight. That'll be exciting. They just had to switch to a bigger venue for him.
Ms. Jackson, would you like me to call Paul Vallis, or do you want me to wait for him to call us?
Well, you know what? Call him in about 2 minutes.
Call him in 2 minutes? Okay.
I'm sure he's riding around. And you know, you can call him and ask him when he'd like to be called.
Okay, I'll call him now and ask him.
Okay,
Thank you.
yes. Thank you so much. Oh, boy. Mr. Brown? Dr. Reed?
Mr. Brown is no longer on.
Oh, okay. Well, ask him if he wants to come back. Well, you know, you can do that after you take care of this.
Yes, I had mentioned I was calling him back after Paul Vallis' segment.
Fantastic. Is Dr. Reeves still here, or has she left?
I am here.
Okay. We're gonna put you on mute. Okay.
Okay, I'm on mute.
Okay, fantastic. And can you listen to this, Dr. Reeves? And because I want to pull a reel from this too.
Okay.
Or maybe just break it up and just put it out there.
Morning. I will.
Okay.
All right, no problem.
No worries, but stay right there, Ed. We'll put you on mute.
Okay.
Okay, was there someone else who just said something? Okay, very good. All right, everybody, let's get right to it. Okay. Well, Barbara, you said Lori Lightfoot's been quiet as a church mouse since the election. She has been. I wonder who she's going to, if she'll endorse anyone. Yes, this has just got to be an incredible moment for her. I mean, just think of the journey she's been on over the past 4 or 5 years. You know, gone from virtually no name recognition to being swept into office and then also being swept out. It's a lot. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. But I think we will look back upon her term as one that was successful. She did a lot of good stuff. She really, really did. But it really lets you know that people have to have a certain feeling about you. They have to have good feelings about you. And if they don't, it's, you know, it's tough. It's tough. And I think that's what happened to her. Oh boy. So we're going to get right to this, everybody. Got a lot of stuff to look at today. I'm going to be keeping up with this Wall Street Journal reporter who has been who has been detained. But you know, guys, journalists and academicians and economists and all kinds of folks, even artists, are used by the intelligence community. So none of this is new.
Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman will return to the Senate in April, 2 months after the Democrats sought inpatient treatment.
What'd you say? Tracy, why don't you call in? Black people of privilege also voted for Trump after Biden was pilloried on certain progressive shows. I don't know if he was pilloried as much as people gave you his record. He has been anti-busing, Tracy. He has been part of the right wing of the party. Absolutely. I mean, I like him personally, but I knew that politically we were almost never in agreement. He is someone who pushed the police officers' Bill of Rights right after the beating of Rodney King. I mean, like weeks later. And that's what he's wanted to be known for. He was never a liberal. He was never a progressive. Now, we can see that what our activism can do, we can push people into our way of governing. But that's something that we have to do, because if we had to depend upon his past, if what was past was prologue, he'd be governing all the way from the right.
Ms. Jackson, I just spoke to Mr. Vallis. I'm going to go ahead and call him when you start to do the headlines.
Fantastic. Okay, and I'll make them as brief as possible so I can bring him on, because I didn't want to just, have him just sit and because that's not fair to him.
Yes, but he's looking out for our call.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. I'm glad that you called. That was a good call. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Oh boy. When you see the pictures of these people who were killed in Nashville, it just breaks your heart. Oh, boy, it breaks your heart. Breaks your heart. These sorts of things happen all the time. All the time. And then when you find out that the shooter, they didn't even want to give this child a name, but 28-year-old Ashley, they now say had tactical training. What? Don't make Ashley mentally ill.
1 minute.
Ashley had some axes to grind. Ashley was angry. Mentally ill people hurt themselves. Angry people hurt other people. Remember that. We need to stop demonizing people who are mentally ill. Oh, they've got a problem. Yeah, you got a problem. Anytime you prioritize war over food and fair housing and decent housing and education and all of that, we're the ones who are mentally ill. Think about that. Stay right here. More of the Santita Jackson Show. Now, Tracy, I wish you would call in, because it's
30 seconds.
Well, I hope that they all learn that burning bridges is a bad idea. Tracy, that's something that many people don't get in life. And politics is life now. So stand by, everybody. Stand by.
10 seconds.
Thank you. Here we go.
Stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, it's Thursday, March 30th. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Matt McNeil and all my brothers and sisters up in Minneapolis, St. Paul at AM 950 Radio. Chad Larson, all and company, sending you all much, much, much love today. Of course, it is Election Day in Chicago and in Wisconsin. They're going to have the opportunity to move their Supreme Court in a progressive direction, and Chicago does too. What's going to happen on Tuesday? What's going to happen today, every day up until Tuesday, because you can vote every day. You can register to vote every day. Please, everybody, same day, on-site voter registration. You can vote in all 50 wards and go to the super site downtown and vote. Please vote, 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 vote. Going to have Paul Vallis on with us in just a couple of minutes. And so let's get to some of these headlines. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. That is the page where you get me. Everybody, people keep going to the Santita Jackson page. That's not it. Please go to Santita Jackson and Friends. Please go there. Please, please go to Santita Jackson and Friends and be my friend there. And the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe there. Like and subscribe there. I'm going to start delivering some content there very shortly. So let's get right to it, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 50 degrees, cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 39 degrees, rain and snow. In the NBA, the Lakers 121, the Bulls 110, the Suns 107, the Timberwolves 100. We are waiting for March Madness this weekend. We will have champions at the beginning of next week. I cannot wait. In the NHL, the Blues will be playing Chicago, and Wild 4 and the Avalanche 2, everybody. So what else is going on? Grief-stricken Nashville residents came together for a city vigil on Wednesday to mourn 3 9-year-old children and 3 adults. Of course, First Lady Jill Biden was also in attendance, and of course, a beautiful song was performed by the great Sheryl Crow. Members are honoring the victims with prayers and songs. The city is struggling to process the tragedy, and a former police officer who provided active shooter training at the school told CNN that the quick thinking actions of teachers who locked down classrooms helped to save lives. Good for them. As Russia's Wagner mercenary group continues to suffer major losses in the key area of Bakhmut, Ukraine's defense minister said Wednesday that Western tanks will likely be deployed as early as next month. And the Senate finds on, they did something really monumental yesterday. They voted to end the national COVID-19 emergency declared by President Trump in March of 2020. So everybody, it's over. Not really. The vote was overwhelmingly bipartisan, 68-23. The joint resolution, which cleared the House earlier this year, now heads to President Biden's desk, who strongly opposes this bill. The administration is already winding down the emergency by May 11th, the date previously announced by the authority, and everyone is praying for this Wall Street Journal reporter who has been detained by Russian authorities. Russian security service said today that it has detained Wall Street Journal reporter Dan Gerskovich, a U.S. citizen on charges of, quote, espionage in the interest of the American government, close quote. The Russian Federal Security Service alleged that Gerskovich collected information constituting a state secret about the activities of one of the enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex, and those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Very excited to welcome one of the persons who would be mayor. We have 2 people who are in contention to be the mayor of Chicago. We have Brandon Johnson, Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson, former Chicago Teachers Union organizer and public school teacher, and the former CEO of Chicago's public schools. Indeed, he's done so much work in city government, and we're so honored that he is joining us once again. And I think we have Mr. Vallis up? I hope we do. And Mr. Vallis, how are you?
I'm fine.
I'm glad I was able to grab you this morning because I know you're out campaigning really hard.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's 5 days a week away, and that's it.
Wow, and we want to remind people, Mr. Vallis, that we have same-day on-site voter registration. You can vote in all 50 wards, and you can vote at the super site downtown. So please, everybody, get out and vote. Indeed, because the race is so tight, I just read a news story that said that your campaign said, it might not be decided on Tuesday night. Is that because of absentee ballots or because the race is so tight, or a combination of those factors and others?
Yeah, I think it's a combination because the race will probably be tight. Obviously, it'll all be driven by who can get their vote out, but also there's a large number of absentee ballots, so it could take a day. You never can tell.
You never can tell in these races. We couldn't tell during the Harold Washington race. I mean,
right.
Everyone was absolutely shocked, and Trump shocked us, and we're just living in a time when everybody's just shocked all the time. I'm almost shocked, and I'm shock and surprise proof. Let's get right to it. I want to know, in these final days of this campaign, you all have been at it. I mean, and of course, the race is becoming more contentious because we're getting closer to Election Day. What has been left unsaid by you and your campaign, Mr. Vallis?
I think we've been focusing on the issues, and we're going to continue to focus on the issues. I think what we've really had to contend with really over the last couple of days, or I'm sorry, not the last couple of days, but we have had to contend with really over the past month or so is a lot of campaign dirty tricks. Like, for example, our signs getting taken down. We've been photographing people taking our signs down. Of course, we then put them up. And then there's been Johnson supporters on the south and west side putting up Vallis MAGA signs that we've, of course, had our people going out and taking down. And just recently, they did a mailing under the headline of the Crusader, basically accusing me of being a racist. And I talked to the editor of the Crusader, and of course, they're doing a very strong piece critical of them using the Crusader fold. So I think there's been those type of antics, trying to divert people's attention from the issues that we've been trying to focus on, the issues of public safety, community schools, the issues of trying to hold the line on taxes to make the city affordable. So, it's just the nature, unfortunately, of campaigning that you're going to have to expect these things. But when it happens, it's still kind of unsettling and shocking.
Well, let me ask you this, because since we're in that particular space, there's some charges that have been leveled at you and your campaign, and certainly people who who have supported you and who purport to really speak for you. That's what supporters really do. And I'm a veteran of the campaign war, so I get it. But you have, in a city that has a history of police involvement in the killing of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, in a city that is known to be one of the most segregated, and at times the most segregated city in the United States, a city in which Bernard Epton, during the Harold Washington campaign, said, hey, before it's too late, all these buzzwords, right? Laquan McDonald is killed by the police. No one felt good about that. No one felt good about Anjanette Young, this black woman whose home was broken into, and she was not dressed. I mean, you just keep on going. A mayor who said shoot to kill, and then you've got someone who's been very prominent and vocal in his support of you, the head of the FOP, Mr. John Catanzara, who's saying that there will be blood in the streets and that there will be a mass resignation, a mass exodus off of the police force. That is part of the record. What can you say about that? Because all of that talk, particularly from the FOP, who have endorsed you, is incendiary. And it's incendiary in a city that has always struggled racially. And I'd like for you to speak to that. I'm not asking you to condemn anyone, but how do you speak to these supporters of yours who are firing these charges that are so incendiary, and that, quite frankly, that could, they're rubbing these sticks together, and once the spark ignites, there's nothing that we can do to put it out. Mr. Vallis.
Well, first of all, Santita, I'm not a paid employee from the Fraternal Order of Police. My opponent is a paid employee of the Chicago Teachers Union. Secondly, I have condemned his remarks in the strongest possible terms, and I condemned it when they happened. The third thing is I got endorsed by the rank-and-file police officers. If you remember, Captain Zera himself wanted to run for mayor. So I have the endorsement of rank-and-file police. I have the rank-and-file endorsement of the sergeants. I have the rank-and-file endorsements of 26 unions. So I've condemned his time and again. He's actually criticized me publicly, too. So at the end of the day, he's not part of my campaign. And look.
But you have been his consultant, though, right? I mean, that was according to a Chicago Sun-Times article in October of 2020.
Well, what I did was I came in to consult on the contract negotiations pro bono. So at the end of the day, I was invited in by rank-and-file police officers with the support of Jim Francis, who was the lead negotiator for the city, because the police had gone almost 5 years without a contract, and there were large numbers of police officers who probably would have retired had they waited a fifth year to get their pay increase and retro pay. So I agreed to participate in the negotiations, and I've said this on this show before, and I said it at the WBZ and the WVON forums again and again, that I agreed to help negotiate the contract on two conditions. The FOP had to accept all the accountability provisions in the consent decree and advocated by reformers, and that was acknowledged in Franz Spielman's article. She pointed it out. And the second thing that I demanded was that I not be paid, and that the FOP donate the money to a children's charity, which they did. I also did not accept any campaign contributions. My opponent has received 90% of his campaign contributions from the Chicago Teachers Union and their affiliates. So the bottom line is his remarks were irresponsible, and they have no place in his campaign. But I'm not an employee for the FOP. I'm not an associate of John Catanzara. I just happen to be supported by rank-and-file police officers. I come from a family of 4 police officers and 2 firefighters and 6 veterans. And, my sons are police officers, one's a firefighter. I also have the support of the firefighters union. So that's a clear distinction. That's a very, very clear distinction. And obviously people have tried to make that association when none exists. So at the end of the day, that's been my position, and I've responded to his remarks, and I've condemned his remarks, and I've pointed out the fact that I actually did this work pro bono to enable the city to finally get a contract negotiated with the police that was able to incorporate the accountability provisions that were being demanded, and at the same time finally get the police officers their retro pay.
Well, as you look at, as you have been capturing evidence of people disrupting your signs, I would like for you to speak to this charge that's been made on this show, and many have corroborated this charge. You have a lot of Latinas who have been out canvassing for Brandon Johnson, who have been followed by people who they have been told support you. I guess I want to give you the opportunity, I want to give you the opportunity to speak to these elements in your campaign, and all campaigns have them. Because the man who's running won't be the man who's governing, because indeed, as tight as this race appears to be, you and Commissioner Johnson will have to work together in some form or fashion in order to bring the city together, because the city is divided in a way that, quite frankly, I've not seen before since the Harold Washington campaign. What about these people who who are feeling harassed? Can you speak to them this morning, not to me, but to them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if people are being harassed, identify or take a picture of the people who are doing the harassing. I've received no evidence that any of my people are going out and harassing people. Just no evidence at all. While we do have evidence of signs being picked up, we filmed it. We do have evidence on the south and west side of the MAGA signs being put up. We have evidence of that. We know for a fact that they mailed out and that they've done mailings under the headline of the Crusader, because I had a conversation with the editor and we saw the mailing. So at the end of the day, those things are concrete. And we've seen a number of consistent and really sometimes outrageous and over the top things being posted and being responded to by the leadership of the Chicago Teachers Union.
But Alderman Cardenas said they're going to deploy people to stop people from stealing the election. And I know that these people are not operating in your spirit, Mr. Vallis. No, I mean, I mean, what do you say to these people who are lighting these matches? Because that's what they're doing.
Well, I haven't seen anybody making those comments. I think Alderman Cardenio was talking to people about being careful about protecting their vote or protecting their forms when they vote online. But I haven't heard anything like that. I think people.
I'll send it to you. It was on Twitter. But I mean, the thing is, I think at this point, I'm looking at a race that is so tight. So many people whom I have respected have supported you and are supporting you. And the thing is, I'm like, well, there appears to be a disconnect because some of your supporters have been quite incendiary and quite frankly, they use language. I mean, and I'm a child of the civil rights movement, which you well know. They've used language that sent a chill up my spine. I mean, as someone who had the Chicago police sitting outside of our home all of my life, and a black security firm sitting in my home all of my life, I'm very sensitive to these, when people say things that could get people hurt, if not killed. And I wanted to give you the opportunity, as people have said all manner of things about everybody in this campaign, just to tamp down the tensions so that we can get to the real issues. I know you want to talk about law and order. I know you want to talk about education. I know you want to talk about economic opportunity. But we need to talk about that too.
Yeah, but Santita, I've been on your show now a number of occasions, and I've been
more than any candidate, by the way.
Right, and at the WBZ forums, and I've always condemned Captain Zera's remarks, and I always pointed out that I was supported by rank and file police officers, of which my sons are rank and file police officers. My wife was a police officer. So at the end of the day, I've always condemned his remarks and his most recent remarks. While obviously there's been some outrageous remarks coming from members of the Chicago Teachers Union about many of the other candidates. In fact, many of the other black candidates, and those remarks should be condemned too. But Captain Zera, I'm supported by rank. Captain Zera and the FOP had no choice but to endorse me. It was like the sergeants had decided initially not to endorse, but the rank and file were so overwhelmingly supportive of me that the sergeants decided to endorse me. I think it was the same thing with Local 2. And obviously there's 26 labor unions that have endorsed me. I mean, Captain Zera's comments are outrageous, and they should be dismissed, and they're irresponsible. And I've condemned his comments, but Captain Zera, it's the rank and file police officers that have endorsed me, and negotiating, getting the police officers, rank and file officers, an 8-year contract with the city that kept large numbers of officers from simply retiring and reducing the ranks further, and doing it for free, and having the money that they were going to pay me donated to a children's charity. I think pretty much provides that separation. That and the condemnation of what Captain Zera said time and again, I think that provides me with the separation. So, people, when they raise this issue, they're trying to make a connection that does not exist. They have been working for years to get the FOP to agree to the accountability provisions that were in the sergeant's contract, and that all the advocates in the editorials boards were clamoring for, and I was able to negotiate that without any sort of struggle, get that into the contract without any sort of struggle, in part because of the leverage I was going to exercise. And, Jim Francis did an article in the Sun-Times where he talked about, he's the city's lead negotiator, has been on contracts for 30 years. And in that article, he not only articulated how I was successfully able to get all the reform provisions implemented into the contract. Now, of course, the accountability provisions have to be enforced, but he also talked about how I was able to negotiate 8 years of 2 consecutive collective bargaining agreements with the old Chicago Teachers Union leadership, and how amicable that relationship was. Incidentally, the next day he was fired. For even commenting and basically saying those things publicly. So my record is pretty clear. I've condemned his comments. I condemn his comments, and I think they have no place in this campaign. I've also made the point that police officers are leaving the Chicago Police Department not because of Brandon Johnson. They're leaving because of poor leadership, their work schedule, the brutal work schedule, the fact that they're being moved all over the city and they're not covering local familiar beats anymore. Those are the reasons that they're leaving in record number, and I pointed that out. And those are the issues that are going to have to address to keep them from leaving.
Well, I've got a couple minutes more with you before we go to break. I wish you could stay with me for a long time, but I know that you're campaigning today, and I'm not going to treat you the way Reverend treats you and keep you forever. But I would like to get closing thoughts from you on this, or if you want to give them on the other side of the break, so you can have about 5 minutes, but you'll have 2 here.
Yeah, I've got a few more minutes. I'd be more happy to do that.
Well, stay right here. We're talking with Paul Vallis, everybody, and my phones are blowing up. They're blowing up because people have a lot to say. This campaign has got everybody involved, and I'm so glad that people are engaged, because the only way that this American Republic can survive and this democratic experiment can really thrive is if you participate. It's a government of, for, and by the people. Thank you, Abraham Lincoln. That is so true. And we're in the land of Lincoln, and we have got an election that's going to really determine, we have the power to determine who we are and the direction in which we must go as a city. And we've got Paul Vallis, who's with us today. He is one of 2 men who would be mayor. So what say you? Call us at 773-763-9278. He's going to give us some closing thoughts here on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Here on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. You are cutting quite the swath all across the country, Mr. Vallis, because AM 950 Radio, Matt McNeil wanted to talk to me about you this week up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's a race of tremendous consequence, everybody. I hope that you're getting registered to vote. Hope that you are voting. And more with the former CEO of the Chicago Public Schools, Paul Vallis, on the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Mr. Vallis, thank you so much for indulging us. I know that you're busy this morning.
Yeah, I'm...
no, hold on. We're on Facebook Live. I just want you to know that. Okay. Okay. I don't want you to say something that... Yeah, I don't want you to think that we're dead. Okay.
I would never do that.
No, I just said, no, that's in fairness to you. I don't want you to, think that, that no one is listening, but everyone is listening. And Kenneth Rush, for his portion, thanks you for reaching out to the Morning Stars this morning, because indeed there are people on my, in this audience who support you and who support Mr. Johnson. They might skew in one direction or the other, but they have the right to hear you, and that's why I'm really glad that that you came, that you were more than willing to come, and thank you, because I've had you on more than I've had any other candidate on, quite frankly. Every time I've called you, you have said, I will be there, and thank you for that.
Well, it's my pleasure. But let me just make a couple observations.
Okay.
If you look at, I don't think my election will not be divisive at all, because I have strong support throughout the city, and there are many people who may not be supporting me publicly because, in many cases, because of the fear of retaliation from the CTU leadership, who once I get elected will close ranks around me. I know that. I've been told that by people. I like to support you, but I've got to stay neutral. I'm concerned about this or concerned about that. And the reason for that is because I have history for advocating and for defending my community. So, are we still on, Santita?
Oh, yes, we are, sir. That was just the station.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No. Pardon me. That was the station. Okay, Mr. Vallis. And Alex, if you could bring that down just a bit, so Mr. Vallis, so that we're a little older. We need a little less of that sound. Okay, Mr. Vallis.
Sorry about
No, No, that's all right.
Yeah. And we've known each other long enough. Will you please call me Paul?
It's so hard for me to do, but it's all done in respect. You know that. So I'm going to work on it.
I always tell people Mr. Dallas was my dad, but
Miss Myrick is on.
But the point that I was trying to make is my, it is because of my history, for providing equal opportunity. You probably remember I was one of the first members of the Daley administration to not only regularly go to Push and get involved in all the events. So Reverend Jackson, when I was in Philadelphia, came. He had events in New Orleans. He came and we had events, and you'll remember I was probably one of the first to become a regular on the Cliff Kelly show. But the reason that I have the support of people like Congressman Bobby Rush and Jesse White and Emil Jones and Dick Durbin. I mean, these are people who have known me for 4 decades. Emil Jones, Bobby Rush.
Mr. Lampy's on.
Jesse, they've known me since my 20s, and they know my work in the black community. They know my activism. They know about
30 seconds.
Probably the largest MBWB program ever enacted in our capital plan. They know about the 78 school buildings I built throughout the city, tearing down all those prefab buildings and replacing them with brick and mortar buildings. They remember.
But you know what I'm eager to have you do? I would love for you to have a town hall meeting. This is just my wish.
10 seconds.
And if I would you mind taking any callers?
Please stand by.
If you want to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That would be great.
I'm probably going to do it as I head to the car.
Okay, of course.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Paul Vallis is with us. Indeed, we are planning to have a panel speak about this after Mr. Vallis leaves. I'm catching him as he's going out to campaign this morning, walking out to the car, but many of you have been calling in. He said, look, I will take the calls. I will take the calls from the callers. And so I'd like for you to make your remarks brief, and wherever you are on the political spectrum, please keep them respectful. Please do that. We're passionate, but we do respect here on the Santita Jackson Show. But Mr. Vallis / Paul, you wanted to make a point before, as we were going to the break.
Yeah, I think the point that I was making is when you look at the support that I have, the support from Emil Jones, who, of course, was president of the Senate and Barack Obama's political godfather, and the support that I've received from Congressman Bobby Rush, the support that I've received from Secretary of State Jesse White. I mean, of course, Dick Durbin supported me on Sunday, but those individuals, particularly Jones and Secretary White and Bobby Rush, I've known them for 4 decades. I've known them since my 20s. I've known them since I did opposition research for the Harold Washington campaign on Bernie Epton, who they ran against when they tried to block him from getting elected mayor. Bobby has known me since I bought and rebuilt the historic Brownsville Armory and opened the nation's first public high school military academy in Brownsville. Of course, Emil Jones has worked. I worked for Emil Jones in the Senate when he was a senator and then later the Senate president. So they know my record. They know my record for hiring people from the community, for putting them into positions of leadership. All my chief academic officers were black. All my chief of staff have been black. I did record minority contracting. 1.55% of all of our of the contracts for the 78 schools we built throughout the city and the 350 renovations went to black and Latino and women-owned businesses, and well over half of those contracts went to black-owned businesses. So at the end of the day, my record on minority hiring, my record on inclusiveness, my record on tearing down prefab schools on the south and west side and replacing them with brick-and-mortar schools, operations.
We have two callers.
Well, Doris Davenport will testify to that because of the vendor fairs we used to have. Ray Anderson, who worked for Push, worked for me as my intergovernmental chief in Washington in 4 different cities for 4 different school districts.
But you know what the challenge is? Because you are absolutely right. I mean, these people who you've all named, for whom I have tremendous respect and have known, they are what people call, they are part of what the black privileged class. There is a disconnect between you, because we have class issues just like all communities do. There's a disconnect between you, Mr. Vallis, and black people, average workaday black folks. There's a disconnect because they don't get the contracts. They don't get those jobs. Their schools were closed. Mind you, you did not close them all, but then under your leadership, we now have a charter school only New Orleans, which is surprising. So the thing is, that's true, but the other piece is, the other side of this is, black folks who don't have access to the corridors of power have a lot of reservations about you. What do you say to them today?
Well, look, first of all, I have to respond. I never had to close a single school in Chicago, period. And we chartered 15 schools in Chicago. Just to put perspective, it was President Obama's education secretary, and this isn't a point of criticism, it's just a fact, who opened 100 charter schools. So the bottom line is we had limited charter schools. But let me make a comment about New Orleans because Reverend Jackson came to New Orleans.
But he doesn't support charter schools. Now, hold on.
No. But he came to New Orleans. He came to New Orleans along with President Obama and others and acknowledged what we had done in New Orleans. When I came to New Orleans, after Katrina, 110 of the 120 schools had been destroyed or rendered uninhabitable. And practically every teacher had evacuated the city. We all remember the catastrophe down there. And what we did was we literally had to rebuild a school system from scratch. And the decision that was made by the Democratic leadership, the decision was made that they wanted, instead of returning to the old corrupt school district that was probably one of the most corrupt and one of the most dysfunctional in the country, to the point where they couldn't even get schools reopened, they wanted to open a system of schools. So schools that did reopen, the first 17 were traditional public schools, went to the state, and they got authorization to open independently. They literally got their own charter so they could be independent schools. So the objective was to create a system of individual public schools, nonprofit schools. That was the strategy. That was the Democratic strategy. And for 7 consecutive years, that system led the state in academic improvement, the second worst system in the state. So when people just flip and say, well, you charter schools in New Orleans. No, we reopened. We built a new school system from scratch because 90% of the system had been destroyed. We built it from scratch so that in New Orleans, all the schools are autonomous local schools governed by their own autonomous local boards. That is what New Orleans is today. That is what President Obama celebrated. And then, of course, as well as a lot of people who support me, then I left to spend years trying to rebuild a earthquake-ravaged Haiti, and of course doing international work in other places in the Caribbean after a whole series of devastated storms. So that's been my history. But Arnie
Duncan said what Rahm Emanuel said. Crisis creates opportunity. That is what is upsetting. I'm a product of the Chicago Public Schools. the regular public schools, and then I went to Whitney Young, like John J. Pershing neighborhood school, and then went to Whitney Young. And what is disturbing is, at Whitney Young, we had signers in the classroom because they were mainstreaming people who were hearing impaired. The charter schools don't take care of these kids with special needs. They don't have the art programs. They do not have the athletic programs. And so I'm wondering about the artistically gifted, the athletically gifted, people who have special needs who are not being attended to in New Orleans. But that having been said, I want you to... Yeah, please respond. No, of course, I'm not going to block you from doing that.
No. The charter schools are all mandated. But, first of all, after Katrina, not only were the schools destroyed, but they actually also destroyed all the records. So we didn't even have record on students. We had to go in and we had to do individual IEPs, which are those individualized plans for special need kids, because the records had literally been destroyed. So the system of schools, in fact, the only select enrollment schools in New Orleans are the old traditional public magnet schools. Okay, so all the schools have to meet the special education requirements. They meet all the special education requirements. New Orleans is a system of independent local schools governed by independent local boards, not some centralized bureaucracy. The money flows to the local schools, and they have to meet all the special needs. In fact, special needs kids in New Orleans who were at 11% proficiency prior to Katrina are now at 45% proficiency. You know how poorly black children are doing in the traditional Chicago public schools today? Only 6% of the kids are proficient in math, and only 11% are proficient in language arts. That's how poorly they're performing, in contrast to how well the kids are performing in school districts that I've left behind.
But the Stanford study shows that kids really there is no appreciable difference between, on the testing outcomes between charter schools and regular public schools. I mean, what about if you become mayor, will you expand or reinvigorate vocational schools, vocational education? I mean, I just remember going through, that was the first place I took algebra, was at Dunbar Vocational School. And they had a home that the students had built in the middle of the school, and it was so wonderful to see, Mr. Vallis. And, I mean, what about vocational education and then funneling those kids into, as the mayor, would you then help to push these unions to accept these black and brown kids into the union so they can get these great union jobs?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's a good question and a very good issue. My approach is twofold. The answer is yes. First of all, there are schools. Just as we have magnet schools, we should have what I call vocational educational magnet schools. In other words, open enrollment schools that students can apply to. But what I want to do is I want to go beyond that. And I've talked about this. I'm sure I've talked about this on your show from time to time too. Is I want to create universal work study, which means I want every city contractor, every single business, every city business, every city agency, every agency that the city controls, and every vendor that the city does business with, to offer paid work study internships and apprenticeships to students who attend the Chicago public schools. And when I met with each of the 26 unions that endorsed me, whether it was the plumbers or the trades or the carpenters, I don't think the carpenters have endorsed me yet. Sorry about that. But whether it was with the police or fire, I have said that I want them to create paid work study jobs for our high school students. In other words, the district will partner with them. They will identify and secure work study jobs.
and the district will work with those unions to provide compensation. So kids, whether they go to a vocational school or not, they will be able to access a work-study job, whether it's with the hospitality industry, whether it's with the engineers, whether it's with the builders or the trades or the plumbers. So what we can then do is to provide work-study opportunities for high school kids wherever they go to school. And I've not only talked about this, I've done op-eds on this in all the major newspapers, and it's been a focal point of my conversations in the public forums. So I think that there's a way to connect young people with jobs and to get them in paid work-study jobs even before they've left high school, so we can keep them engaged, and that's something I would do. I've also told the 26 unions that they need to create and open up apprenticeships for returning citizens, because we have tens of thousands of individuals who have returned from incarceration, and they can't find housing, they can't get into occupational training programs, they can't find jobs. So these are two things that I talked about at length. So I agree with you. We need to not only restore voc ed, but we need to be able to connect our high school kids while they're going to school to jobs while they are in school, so we can give them an incentive to stay in school. We can introduce them to the work world. We can have them in a safe and secure place after school and on weekends, and we can put some money in their pocket.
Well, you know what? You have been so generous with your time today. I've got a lot of people. I also have a panel. But what I'd like for, with your begging your indulgence, I would like to give each one of the callers and the panelists 1 minute to make a comment, and then I'd like for you to wrap everything up and just have the runway to make your statement. Okay, Mr. Vallis / Paul? I'm trying to get to Paul. It's hard for me to do. My parents are listening right now, so I can't. They're listening. And you know how my mother is in particular. So there you go. I want to live. So let me go to Mark. Mark, what's on your mind? 1 minute, Mark, for your comment or question.
My question is, where does Paul plan on putting low-income housing, or is the city just going to be for gentrification? I mean, people are getting pushed out of their homes. The working class are getting pushed out of their homes so wealthy people and middle-class people could move into the city. So where's the low-income housing going to go?
Thank you, Mark. That's an excellent question. Mr. Vallis?
Really good question. A number of things really quickly. And I'm in the car, so if you hear things bumping, it's just travel noise. A number of things. First of all, I'm going to allocate a share of the tax increment financing revenues. It's well over $1 billion to affordable housing, because right now they're not using any of that $1.1 billion diversion, or it's
Mark is off.
Or it's hundreds of millions of dollars in surplus money for affordable housing. So I want to fuel the programs like the Bring Chicago Home program, so that you can create affordable housing in communities that need it. Secondly, I want to seize the 15,000 residential facilities that are vacant. They're in tax court, scavenger sales. They're out there. Many of the buildings, like the schools that they shut down, are rotting. And I want to take those buildings, turn them over to community-based organizations and not-for-profits, so that they can then make those buildings available to address the community affordable housing needs. Some schools need domestic violence shelters. Some communities need residential facilities for returning citizens. The third thing that I want to do is to remove the obstacles for the 125,000 apartment owners to convert unimproved space to garden units. If they did that, they could create about 150,000 affordable units over the next 3 to 4 years, because there are so many. There's at least 125,000 rental buildings, multi-family buildings that have unimproved space that can be converted. And then the final thing that we need to do is we need to get the CHA in the game. The CHA Section 3 is a disaster. the CHA has thousands of units that are sitting there empty. They've been renovated and they're empty. So I believe if we do those four things, and we impose an assessment cap on residential property, particularly in areas that are undergoing gentrification, I think those things will enable us to address the affordable housing issue in a comprehensive and effective way.
Let me bring on Ardenise Myrick from Live Free, Illinois. She wants to make a comment. 1 minute for you, Ms. Myrick.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Vallis. I want to know about public safety has been just championed by a lot of our candidates this election. And we've heard people throwing policing at the problem. And we know that adding more police does not mean more safety. What other ideas and innovations do you have to bring true public safety that are outside of policing in the city of Chicago?
Well, three things I've talked about, and I've done op-ed pieces in all the major newspapers about this. The first thing I would do is reopen the mental health centers, but also open opioid and drug addiction centers. I lost my youngest son to the effects of long-term drug addiction. So my family has seen firsthand the devastation it can cause. So at the end of the day, those are things that have to be done. If you're getting if you're facing the federal and state reimbursement dollars, there's no reason why these mental health and opioid drug addiction centers can't be subsidized by the federal government and by the state. What I would also do is the money that the mayor has allocated but yet not necessarily distributed to those crisis intervention programs, those violent prevention programs, I think they appropriated like $200 million and only like 5% of money has been allocated. I would reappropriate that money and I would send it to the local districts and allow the local police councils, these locally elected police councils in the community, determine which groups in those communities are the most effective groups at dealing with violence reduction.
Thank you so much for that. Stay right there, Ardenise, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No.
We shouldn't be imposing the program. We shouldn't just be imposing the providers. We should let the community decide. Two other things really quickly, too. I mentioned work study. If we open our schools through the dinner hour on weekends, on the holidays, our campuses I'm talking about, not to make the teachers work longer, and if we invite community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and the park district to bring their programs to the campuses, and we create the work-study programs that I've talked about, we're going to have hundreds of thousands of young people during the violent hours of the day. And you know what happens on the weekends and on the holidays, violence spikes. We're going to have young people engaged. We're going to have them off the street. We're going to have them in constructive activities. We're going to have them in work-study jobs. So those are things we can do that go beyond just policing to make sure that the communities are safe.
And, let's bring some of these teachers back and have them as tutors and make sure that there's lots and lots of food there. Absolutely. Just very quickly, because I want to leave the last 2 minutes to you so that you can wrap things up. But I wanted to get Kevin Lampe, 1 minute, Kevin, your comment, and then Dwight, 1 minute, your comment. Kevin Lampe? Is Kevin there? Or is he on mute? Well,
he might be on mute.
Okay, well, we'll come back to you, Kevin. Dwight McKee, your comment in 1 minute.
Kevin, is that you?
No, it's Santita and Mr. Vallis. 1 minute for your comment.
It seems as if his approach to education is the same approach that the Dream Team have. Is that when you take the best and the brightest and put them on the same team, when LeBron and Wade and come to the same team, of course you create a super team.
Kevin Lampe hung up.
All of the scores go up, the rebounds go up, the assists go up, because the best players are now on the best team. And so, of course, everything improves because you have strategically placed the best students in the best schools. But it's at the expense of the other teams, is at the expense of the other schools. And so it's always disproportional. So it really.
Okay, Dwight, I need you to wrap that because I've got 2 minutes left before we come off the air, and I want to give those 2 minutes to Mr. Vallis.
Yes, Santita, I think he's talking about magnet schools. Let me point out, because there's been some talk that my opponent wants to close magnet schools, or is not sure. Let me point out, and incidentally, most of the teachers' union leadership sends their kids to magnet schools. So anyway, so obviously they think
Kevin Lampe's back on.
and that's great. You can get into a magnet school. That's great. But let me point out that there's 150 high schools in Chicago, and only 6 are magnet schools. And, of course, you went to one of them. So it's not like if you got rid of the magnet schools tomorrow, it wouldn't have an impact on the rest of the system. And the test score improvements that I was citing, particularly the tripling of math scores and reading scores in Chicago and Philadelphia, those were aggregate scores for the entire system. No school district has seen the growth in academic performance than the districts that I have run in 3 different cities. But let me make one comment. My strategy is to put magnet-type programs in neighborhood schools. So that's why when they were opening Northside College Prep and Peyton, incidentally, before they tore down Cabrini Green, when kids from Peyton were guaranteed seats, when I built Gwendolyn Brooks and rebuilt King and Lindblom, and when we did those schools, we also put international baccalaureate programs in 20 neighborhood high schools so that we could transform those neighborhood high schools and put the type of programs. My strategy was to put magnet programs in neighborhood high schools for neighborhood children. So if parents couldn't get into a Whitney Young or couldn't get into a Walter Payton, they were still satisfied with their neighborhood high schools like Morgan Park, like Washington, like Amundsen, like Senn, like Prosser. They like Curry. They were satisfied that those neighborhood schools had the type of high quality programs too. So that strategy, incidentally, produced the biggest increase in school district enrollment in like 50 years. The school district enrollment during my watch grew by 40,000, 125,000 more students than they have today. So that's a prescription for success, and it's a prescription that will guide me. Not more charter schools. There's plenty of charter schools, but putting high-quality programs in neighborhood schools, so the neighborhood school becomes your school of choice.
Paul Vallis, everybody, and in fact, you're going to be with us one more time before the election, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for extending your time today. He was only supposed to be with us until 7:28, but you see how much time he has given us this morning so that he could speak to everyone, and he's in a car now on his way to campaign, and I want to thank you, Mr. Vallis. Blessings to you.
Thank you. I'll talk to you in a couple of days.
Absolutely, and I've got these... I've got Kevin Lampe. Kevin Lampe, you're back. I want you to give your comment. We're still on Facebook Live, but Mr. Vallis is going to have to take his leave.
Kevin dropped. Dr. Reeves is still on.
Dr. Reeves? Well, the day didn't work out the way I thought it would, but here we are. Do we have Ms. Myrick still on and Mr.
I'm here,
and Mr. Dwight McKee? Is he still on? Okay. Well, Dr. Reeves, your comment?
It's very interesting listening to Mr. Vallis speak. I don't think there is really a plan to have vocational programs in Chicago if he becomes mayor. And just looking at the statistics from what was going on in New Orleans when he was in charge, the state of dropout for special ed kids and services provided for special ed kids was barely existent. It was almost non-existent. So one of the things I think we need to be mindful of is that anyone who takes on that mantle of leadership needs to have everyone in mind. It cannot just be driven by corporate desires and corporate needs. Students need to understand that they're valued. whether they are general ed students or special needs students. And there have to be programs in place to ensure that every student gets that equity in education, equity in learning. There has to be fairness for each and every student that is educated in this country. Because again, and it might sound cliche, every child in this country is the future of America. And the minute we forget that, we're actually saying that this country will no longer be existent. So while everyone is on, this political journey and everyone is thinking of how best to serve their own personal needs, they need to all remember that it is the people who they're supposed to be concerned about. It is the people, children, adults alike, who need to be first and foremost in their thoughts, not just the corporatocracy.
Well, and I think we have to look, generally speaking, at the corporatocracy, because they've got a plan. They've got a plan, and people who fail to plan to fail. They've got a plan. We, the people, Dr. Reeves, have to have a plan. And that is really to unplug the corporatization of our schools. Schools should not be a business. They should be the people's business. And you ought to be able to get ought to be able to get an excellent education at a neighborhood school and the magnet schools. I mean, I think there's space for all of it. And so, yes, please call Ms. Myrick back, because I wanted to hear more from her. I had to move things around because just Dr. Reeves. I don't know if you're there. Dwight McKee, are you still there?
I'm here. I also wanted to speak to something that was said earlier.
Okay, but hold on. I just wanted to explain to the audience. I plan to have Dwight McKee, Artenise, Myrick, Kevin Lampe, G2 Brown, and Dr. Reeves on to respond to what they heard from Mr. Vallis. But Mr. Vallis extended his time, and then he said, no, I will take callers. And so I said, okay. So let me I had to just think on the fly and convert my panel into callers and let you all give your comments and have him respond. So
Dr. Reeves is on. Would you like me to call the rest of your panel?
Yes, please. Because I want them to. I thank you so much, Alex, and everyone give Alex a round of applause, because he has been learning this show, and boy, there's no one who he has jumped in. I mean, he calls me at 5:30 in the morning if he hasn't heard from me yet. Miss Jackson, you want to go over the run sheet? Ha, 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 ha. He is all over it, and I love it, love it, love it. That's right, Sean. You got to give mad props to Alex, because Alex is doing it. Yes, he is. But what were you about to say, Dr. Reeves?
So I think Dr. Wilson mentioned something earlier about Mr. Vallis being given his positions in each situation by a mayor. In Philadelphia, he was not hired by a mayor. The school system was taken over by the state. A corporate entity was put in place to reorganize that system, and it was not a mayor that put him there. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, that was also driven by corporate entities.
They're driving everything, Dr. Reeves. They're even driving. I mean, you heard what happened yesterday in the U.S. Senate, 68 to 23. Now, poof, COVID-19 is over. I'm like, upon what basis? Y'all are still telling me I need to take the shot. They won't let Jovan Nokovic in the country because he hasn't gotten the shot, even though it doesn't stop the spread, doesn't stop you from getting it. They won't let him in the country because he hasn't gotten the shot. I'm like, okay, well, what are y'all talking about? Now the Senate says, okay, COVID is over. So what are you talking about? What about all the people who were fired? Are you going to bring them back? What's up?
Yeah.
And all this is driven by
I just want people to know that it's not the mayors that put him in place.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that I'm trying to make the point, the broader point, and I think you're making the broader, deeper point that, I mean, even having city managers, this is the corporatization of our government. Corporations.
Mr. Lampe's on.
They're driving everything, and we have to deal with that, Dr. Reeves. Kevin Lampe, my show got completely turned around today.
Well, that is good, because it was important for people to be able to hear directly from him, and I applaud him for sticking around and for answering some tough questions.
He stuck around. I'll give him that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I will give you that.
I will say I will add this observation. It is I can hear in his voice that this race is incredibly close.
Now, why do you say that? And I say that because let me explain to people who you are. Kevin Lampy and Kitty Kurther are really among the top political operatives, not just in Chicago, not just in the United States, Dr. Reeves, but around the world. They've taken Reverend out of the country, and they have tremendous respect from people. Paul Rusesabagina, she went down to get him. I mean, these are people who are very, very, very connected. They train candidates, and you were working with Pat Dowell during this past congressional campaign. I guess it was an election because Bobby Rush said, I'm not going to run to take this seat again. So, I mean, and everyone who can get their advice, we seek it out because they really understand the science of politics. You know, poli-sci, which I could never get into in college, but, you know, I can get into it in real life. Dr. Reeves will take any class because she just loves that sort of thing. but I just wanted to give people context for what you were saying.
McKee's on.
Who else is on, Alex?
Mr. McNee.
Mr. McKee?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. McKee's on.
Okay, and I want you to know people giving you mad love today, Alex, because you are doing, I just have to say, as I bring you on, Mr. Castaneda is doing such fantastic work. And thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
Turn up that applause for yourself. Go on, put it on there. Go on,
Thank
put it
you
on.
very much.
Put it on. Where is it? Where's the sound effects? Alex. What? But okay, we're gonna give you. Come on, everybody, let's give it to Alex. Give it to him. But so what did you hear in his voice today? I mean, did you read anything into his willingness to stay on the show for an hour and then some?
Absolutely. This is, in the closing days of the campaign, you go into election day with always cautious optimism. But your internal polling is usually pretty accurate on what's going to happen.
What's internal polling? Explain that to people.
Yeah, so the internal polling, the campaigns themselves are doing tracking polls. And tracking polls are polls that you're doing on a regular basis in order to get a snapshot in time of what is happening that particular day. So every couple of days, you're going back and talking to people through your polling firm and looking at who's winning the race and what arguments are winning and what arguments are losing. And so the campaign, and he's got the money to do these good polling, so they know exactly where they're at right now. They were confident going into the first part of this race that they were going to probably be in first and definitely in second place. But you make it to the runoff. But that polling tells you and guides you what you need to do in the days to close the race. Now, we're in our voting season right now, and so it's a little more difficult to gauge it because we just have one election day, and that's the final day of voting. So they know that there is probably a 10 to 12, and this is what I'm hearing from a number of different sources, 10 to 12% of the voting population that is interested in voting hasn't made a choice yet. And so they know that's going to be the margin. This race is going to be razor thin. And I know in working with candidates, you can hear it in their voice. When you prep them, when you're preparing them to go out and to campaign in those closing days, how aggressive you need to be. And he is talking more. He's hearing his voice that this race is real, and that I have to be working hard for every single last vote that's out there because a small number of votes is going to determine the outcome of this race.
And I get the sense, but you know what, just in furtherance of your point, and please come back to this, I get the sense, and this is where I think we have to understand politics, we push candidates right or left. That's what we do. Because if you left it to Joe Biden is a right-of-center Democrat. That's what he is. He always has been that. Anti-busing, pro-police, and even as you're watching Rodney King's head bashed in. Like him personally, but I just know that's where he is. I was telling people, do not vote for Jesse Jackson under any circumstances during the 88 campaign cycle. Got it. I am not mad at you because that's the nature of the business. That having been said, it has been our votes. It has been our activism, and it has been, it's been the populist wing. It's been black people who've pushed him to the left. We've made him do. And that's okay, everybody. You have to understand that's what LBJ, I think that's a piece that President Obama missed. Instead of castigating Cornel West and Tavis Smiley and Reverend Jackson, quite frankly, let them help push you and let them make you great. That's the way it happens. If you did not have Frederick Douglass, I promise you, I think Lincoln could have gone another way. We'd probably be in Liberia, Kevin. But you had a Frederick Douglass in Lincoln's ear saying, wait. No, we're not going back to Africa. Wait. We need the vote. Wait. We need citizenship. Wait. Hold on. We need to be free. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments. But you got to have people who push, Kevin. And so you what you're hearing is him being pushed now. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I'm hearing him being pushed, but I'm hearing also that he knows that this race is going to be so close, and that he better be able to govern from a position where he's not going to get. Let's put it this way: he is not going to get a mandate. Whoever wins this race, but I think it's going to be Brandon Johnson. But they're not going to have a mandate. Mayor Lightfoot won with almost 80% of the vote in the runoff. That gave her a mandate. That gave her the opportunity, probably gave her too much confidence, and she spent all the way that political capital. But the next mayor is going to come into their office with just barely over 50%. And that tells you that more than, that half the people that voted aren't happy with you. And so that's going to make you govern much more carefully and govern from a position where I've got just as many people like me as don't like me. Then you have a city council with 16 new people. 16 new people are going to be in there. And the city council that's flexing its muscles right now about how they're going to choose chairman. And they're not going to become a rubber stamp for the mayor as they have been. So it is going to be, Chicago is going into a new era here. We're going to see a strong city council that is going to fight against a strong mayor.
Ooh, Dwight McKee, he's sounding like you. That we're at an inflection point. Dwight?
Yeah, I think so. I think that he's absolutely correct. And I think it's going to be a struggle all the way through because so much is at stake. Ballas can say, whatever he wants to say, but the reality is that Chicago is ripe for gentrification. And he converts these buildings. The people are going to convert the buildings. He's saying that the social service groups are going to have a right to convert the buildings. But even they're going to have to bring in developers to do that. And so it's going to be, really starting off all over again, starting at the beginning, because now you have the same system operating where developers come in and convert those buildings, and they're going to have a certain amount of rent in order to be able to maintain the buildings. Or if they sell the buildings, where are the people going to get the money from to buy the buildings because of the disparity in income and cash flow? You still have a two-tier system working. Same thing with the schools.
Dr. Reeves is on.
He can say what he want to say. It's still going to be a two-tier system. One is because it's built around test scores and culturally based test scores, which is going to always give one crowd the advantage over the other crowd. And it's always going to be an imbalance when you look at performance, because where you start is going to be pretty much where you end, is the students who have the best test scores and who have been taught around test scores are going to be the students that excel. And that's why I was trying to use, before I got cut off, that dream team analysis, is that if you bring in the best players on one team, of course, all of the different statistics on the team are going to improve. It's going to be more rebound. It's going to be more 3-point shots and 3-point scores. It's going to be more dunks because you got Dwayne Wade and you got LeBron James now on the same
Wait a
team.
minute, all the Hall of Famers.
All the Hall of Famers on the same team. And so by contrast, all of the stats are going to improve, particularly in relationships to the teams that you've taken them off of. By definition, all of their stats are going down because now Cleveland no longer has LeBron. It's a two-tier system. Same thing in the police department. Is that the people who have the advantage are always going to have the advantage. When you talk about bringing in the retired police officers, 80% of whom are Irish, you're going to create the same system that you've had before. You have 1,000 of the same old. And now you have that, plus you have a burden of new pensions for the next 20, 30, 40 years that somebody has to pay for. And where is that money going to come from? When you talk about the people who, when you talk about the reflex time of when a crime happens and the police shows up, and they're talking about now it takes a half hour or an hour for the police to come to the scene of the crime. That's not true for all communities. That's only true for us and the poor. Is if you have a crime on the Gold Coast, you have 10 squad cars there within 4 or 5 minutes of whatever the crime is. That's not true for everybody. That's only true for some. It's the disparity built into the system. And so I think that we have to be very cautious when we hear these ideas that are not, many of these ideas that are not implanted in reality. When you talk about keeping the schools open for students to go there over the weekend and 7 and 8 o'clock at night, who's going to look after those students? Who's going to teach those students? Are you going to bring more seasoned teachers in to teach them? Or are you planning on the parents to meet you there and watch over their children? Well, if you're going to do that, the children is going to be at home with their parents, who also have jobs, who also have other children. I mean, we have to really kind of look past the hoopla to see what's real and what's not real, what's real and what's memory.
Well, now there you have it.
Santita, could I make one point? I've got to run here.
Sure.
I wanted to say how much I appreciate my new friend, Mr. McGee, here, and his comment about create these all-stars. One of the challenges I found with magnet schools is I don't think that magnet schools are good public policy, but I think they're the best option for a parent. And that's the problem, is we've created this choice. In my high school, everybody knew who the valedictorian was going to be, and we all competed against him. But if you pull those people out, if you pull those smart kids out of the schools and send them all to one smart kid school, you also pull out all the involved parents. And we had an exchange student that lived with us for years. You know her, Frida. And what I noticed when I went to the parents' meeting, there was like a couple hundred parents meetings. A couple hundred parents came. But what we lost was those parents could have been at another high school where they could be mentoring other parents on how to be effective advocates for their students. And so this is the challenge of education, and we need to put the resources where they need to be. We need to support our public school teachers, and we need to stop doing schools for profit.
You get no pushback from me. When I have to tell you, when I heard about a Whitney Young, I wanted to go there because I felt that the top students would be there, and I felt that I should compete with them, and I wanted to be in school with them. Period. But then I wanted to go to Kenwood, which was also a great school, a great neighborhood school, and it was closer to me too. So I mean, my parents were just into public education. Period. But I think that we should have all of it. But that having been said, we also, when my brother was in Congress, he formulated, he and Frank Watkins wrote an amendment to the Constitution guaranteeing equal access to equal high quality education to every child, because that is not the guarantee. That is not the guarantee at all. I mean, you do not have a constitutionally protected right to learn to read in the United States. And that is why the kids in Detroit are suing the Detroit public schools. And we got to deal with all of that. Dwight?
What makes Michael Jordan so great, and what makes, if you understand his movie, is that he didn't bring in other superstars. He only had one. What he did was he taught how other good players how to become great players, and mediocre players how to become good players, and was able to improve a team. And that's what equitable education does, is your good players, your good students, teach the mediocre students how to become good students, and the good students how to become great students. You have, like he says, one or two valedictorians who become the role models for everybody else, and they become the standard. And you eat lunch with them every day, and you do homework with them every day, and you learn their habits, and you all kind of grow together. When I was in school, I wasn't nearly the smartest guy in my classroom.
Well, that's doubtful, but okay, I'll go with it.
Who were much smarter than I was.
That's doubtful, but we'll go with it.
By definition, that you won't be able to argue, they had better study habits.
Okay.
You know me well enough to know that they had better study habits than I had.
No, I know you well enough to know that you read everything, but I'm just going to go with this story.
But they became my role models, and I did homework with them. I had lunch with them, and they challenged me to be better.
See, you have to understand.
And
I have to interrupt Dwight here. I've known Dwight all of my life since I was like 2. I know his mother and his father. His sister babysat me. So when he talks about all that he did not do, and I know his baby brother, Dr. Reeves, please. His mother called me because she thought that I had split an infinitive on the air. Because she could call me because it was my Auntie Lois. So don't even try it, Dwight. But I'm feeling you on the general point.
And my little hoopling friends that I was tight with, my little athlete friends, I challenged them to be better.
Thank you.
I said, well, if we're going to play
ball, Dwight is an extremely brilliant mind.
Yes, he is. Girl, please. And his mama was not going to tolerate. See, she was not going to tolerate a gangbanger in her house. Auntie Lois, for real? Trust and believe. No.
Oh, no.
But
I got Arthur them off the streets.
I know, but she required that Arthur behaved a certain way if she was going to spend time with her son. Because let us be clear, you were also a student leader who was up under Reverend, who was up under Reverend Evans, I'm feeling you, Dwight, but also the whole point of getting folks to, because when Bevel gave you books and when my mother and father gave you books, you inhaled them. You were...
Yeah, but I also shared them. I also taught the author crowd who were anti-academic. I had Friday night meetings with the youth division, and I talked to Vicki Johnsons and the Arthur Reeds and the John Harpers, and I challenged them. And I took the blackboard out every Friday night, and the things that the Bevels taught me and Reverend Jackson taught me, I taught them. And now the Vicki Johnson, who has 2 churches, are teaching other people. And so I'm saying that it's something about that sense of community and shared experiences and access to the quality, which improves the whole lot, as opposed to you taking the cream out of the crop, putting them all together, and giving them all of the blankets, and everybody else is cold in the winter. That's all I'm saying.
Oh no, I was having a little bit of fun with you. That's all, Dwight. And Dr. Reeves, who's an educator, was like, organically, he's the most brilliant guy I've ever met. So I'm like, yeah, I know. And my mother feels the same way.
He's definitely brilliant.
My mother feels the same way. That's why she's like, well, we need to talk to Dwight. Where is he? Because they're both half nuts and they think the same way. But you know what? I have someone who's been listening. Someone who's been listening. In fact, Mr. Vallis called his name today. My fellow, well, he's a year behind me at Whitney Young. There you go. So he's not going to have his big birthday this year as I am. But there we go. Ray Anderson, you've been listening, and it has been driving you crazy because you are a Vallis supporter. You worked for him. What did you do for Paul Vallis?
I initially was his community relations person, but then he promoted me to be his director of government relations and his deputy chief of staff. And ultimately, he sent to Washington to be his lobbyist, and I lobbied for CPS under 5 superintendents and 4 board presidents.
Now, you've been hearing the conversation. You said you wanted to jump on. You sent me a text. I've known Ray for 40 years.
By the way, we're not just friends.
Oh, okay. No, of course. But I wanted to say, he said, I can't take anymore. There's so much misinformation out here. So I wanted to give you your say. That's why I was like, now? Okay, because we're trying to get off, but, go on. And I'll bring you back on, too, just so that you know.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I had a disadvantage of not hearing a lot of the conversation, but near the end, I started hearing people talk about him being supported by corporate interests in every job he went, and the fact that he hadn't been appointed by mayors. He, in fact, applied for the job in Philadelphia. He's supported by the Council of Great City Schools, which represents the 65 largest urban school districts in the nation at the time, and one of the most progressive organizations on education that we know of. In fact, Reverend Jackson spoke at the conference on many occasions, among other people. Like
but wait. Before you throw Reverend Jackson's name into the mix, Reverend Jackson has never supported charter schools, Ray. Now.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, I just want to be very specific because I hear folks putting his name out here, and I just want personally, we like Paul Vallis very much. But there is a Michelle Rhee and so many people. There is a corporatization that's happening, not just in education, but it's happening in healthcare. It's happening everywhere. The Senate just voted to end, for business interest, the COVID-19 pandemic yesterday. So, please have at it.
My mission in Reverend Jackson was a relationship to the Council of Great City Schools, and the fact that the nation has supported Paul's appointment to superintendent in Philadelphia. Mary Landrieu, in fact, the folks who Mary Landrieu brought an entire group of stakeholders in education to Chicago a few years prior to Paul leaving, which enhanced her interest in his form of government, his leadership style, I should say. The New Orleans Recovery District was governed to be was structured to be a charter district. He was appointed by not a corporate interest. He was appointed by Paul Pasternak, who was the superintendent of the state superintendent. So my only thing was dispelling this notion that Paul is being backed by some nefarious corporate interests to go into school districts and then convert them into corporate entities, which, by the way, charter schools are not. But there are some corporate charter schools, but that's not what charter schools are. But that's another question altogether. The point I'm making is that Paul is always, in my estimation, from everything I've ever experienced with him, and most of my time with him was in Chicago, has always looked out after the interests of the most the poorest students who were most behind, and them students who were minority. And I can count several examples and incidents that happened. I remember going to a school on one occasion that Paul sent me to because the principal was having difficulties with the gang, the parents recruiting the students in gangs. Good Friday is considered Black Friday in many of these instances. When I got to the school, she was so happy to see somebody from the board. She didn't even deal with that issue. She took me around the school. The first thing she showed me was a fault line that was running down the middle of the school. It was cracked. And it looked like the San Andreas fault. The school was about to split in half. Then she took me to the first and second floor landing. And they were having classrooms on the first and second floor landing because her classrooms were condemned. She showed me the bathrooms, and both the girls' and boys' bathrooms were condemned. One was too hot, the other one was too cold. But the worst of all situations was that she took me down to the basement, and she showed me 2 classrooms partitioned by milk crates in the dark next to a boiler room. And I was so sickened by the situation, I didn't know what to do. I took the information back. I took copious notes. I took the information back to the central office. I got a cold, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I took the information back to the central office. And I was most worried about not being able to get attention on it because, there's so many trains moving that, everything's an emergency. But he just so happened to be in his office, and his secretary said, "Go right on in." So I came in, and he could see the stress on my face, so he snatched the notes from me, and he started reading them. And I could see him getting more physically upset as he read the notes. And he said, "You know what to do, Linda?" He said, "Get Tim Martin down here. Tell him to bring the capital book." He says, "Call John Mayorga, the budget director." He said, "Get Giacomo Mancuso down here, who was the demographer." And he snatched the book from Tim Evans' hands. And he looked on. He said, "Giacomo, I need you to find those kids another school, a temporary school to go in." He says, "Tim, take this project off. Put this on. We're going to build those kids a new school." And he did that in a matter of 10 minutes. And that's the kind of leadership he has exhibited. And that's the kind of care he has for the least of these. And I saw him do that. And I was so relieved because I didn't know what I was going to have to do after that to get his attention on the matter if he hadn't responded. But he responded in minutes, not hours, not days, not weeks, not years. And he built those kids a new school just like that. That's the power, first of all, of someone who has authority and who has the kind of business and financial acumen that he has that can make decisions for them, in the best interest of people who need it. And I saw that example. I saw him go into when the kids on the State Street corridor were trapped in the buildings in the Robert Taylor home because snipers were shooting at the police from the top of the building. And the kids couldn't get to school. He called all the black men in the central office and said, "Listen, if I go there, the police are going to have to come back because the media is going to come with me." He pulled us, convened us all. First time I grew up on the west side of Chicago and born in Inglewood. First time I'd ever seen this level of poverty. We go into the Robert Taylor homes that morning and knock on doors and and tell the parents to get the kids dressed. We're coming back and taking them to school. And he got those, and the police came back, and he got that situation under control. Then he bought washing machines for those schools because many of the kids don't come because their clothes are soiled. And so he made sure that they had washing machines in school. When we determined that the kids couldn't read as well because they were when he determined that what he did is he tested all the children who were lowest performing in reading for vision. And then when he discovered that they couldn't read, he bought 2 pair of eyeglasses for each one of those kids to make sure that they had vision care. He paid for funerals of children who were killed in the Chicago public schools, raised money for that. Not in the Chicago public schools, but Chicago public school students who were killed. He paid for their funerals.
Well, hold on.
He did so many.
Well, he's done a lot of things that I want because he still leaves a bad taste in a lot of mouths. And so I want Dwight and Dr. Reeves to respond to you. And I promise you, I'll bring you on. I will bring you on another time, Ray. Dwight, and Dr. Reeves, as you listen to Ray Anderson's story, what say you?
Well, I think that when you take a situation where you don't want to teach history, real history, those kids and those teachers would look at those situations and feel like the reason those schools were in disrepair is because of their innate inferiority. Those kids were really the victims of a racism and an oppression that allowed these schools to go into that kind of disrepair because there were no immediate investments in the school. And so...
What does that have to do with Paul Vallis? This centuries old, decades.
But let him finish, Ray. Let him finish.
Okay, what it has to do with Paul Vallis, and when you tell kids that they cannot learn history because it would make white people feel uncomfortable, the kids themselves then don't understand the social...
No, he did say that in a podcast, and it was a free-form podcast. Hold on one moment. He did say that in a podcast, and yes, he did.
That's not what the podcast.
Yeah, no, no, but we heard it. I mean, and I didn't just hear an excerpt. I listened to the whole thing.
I heard it too, but I also know that he brought Dr. Proctor.
No. Let's keep the issue right where it is, because in that same because in that same podcast he said that that CRT. Wait. We don't talk over each other here. Just hold on. Because in that podcast, I don't want it mischaracterized. I don't think that's what you're seeking to do, but that having been said, I think we need to say the whole thing. He said that this would give black kids an excuse not to excel. It would make white children, it would diminish the self-esteem of white children because they wouldn't know how to handle this information about the misdeeds of their foreparents. Now, that's putting it in a nutshell, and that is why people have objected to that.
Is that a direct quote, or is that...
No, it's not. I mean, yeah, it's direct quotes, and I will send you the interview so you can hear the whole thing.
I can tell you he mandated requirement.
I'm not giving you, excuse me, I'm not giving you direct quotes. So I'm giving you the spirit of what he said. Now, I can pull it up if you like, and I will send it to you. Because people sent it to me and they were incensed, and before I respond, I don't jump to conclusions, Ray. I arrive at them. So I had to listen to it, and I said, okay, let me get the context in which this happened. Okay, so I mean, no, I'm just saying he did say that. He did say that.
So I can't speak to that, but I can speak.
No,
to
no, you just mentioned it, but that did happen, and if you're going to speak about it, you got to speak to it.
I'm speaking to it. I'm saying that he mandated Black history as a requirement for graduation in Philadelphia.
I got you, but he also said this is his problem with critical race theory, with teaching really the most damnable parts of our history, that it would make white children feel bad, and it would give black children a reason not to excel. Now, he did say that in that interview, and what I'm going to do is send you the link to the interview so you can hear the whole thing. Okay?
I say that he did say that. I say that he's guilty of saying that.
It's not even guilty. It's not guilt or innocence. That is what he said. That's what he said. It's not about.
It sounds like an indictment, but
it's not. No, wait a minute, Ray. It's not an indictment. It's simply what he said. Now, the thing is, look, I said and did some things 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago with which I disagree, and I have changed my mind. That having been said, this is what he said, and I will send you the link so that you can make an informed comment about that interview, because if you haven't heard it, you can't make an informed comment about it, okay, to be fair.
I have heard it, but the informed context is that
That's not what he said. It's what he did.
That is no. It's what he said.
This is the fact that he
But it's
mandated
but Ray, it's a both and, honey. It's a both and.
as a graduation. But yeah, that's fine. I agree.
Okay.
But my point is, you have to speak about both. And I haven't heard anybody say anything about the fact that he mandated graduation, about Black history as a requirement for graduation in Philadelphia.
Well, because also that was that was
managing
also.
the history. But if you're managing the history, is that really history or is that his story? It's that if these kids now believe that they're in these impoverished schools because of their own inadequacy, then they develop it reinforces the kind of inferiority complex that they have, and they believe their only salvation is to be transferred to a school with better students rather than improve the schools that they're already in. And I'm saying to you that the danger of charter schools is that the unintended consequences, or sometimes intended consequences, of these charter schools is you take the cream of the crop out of the neighborhood schools, you create these superstar schools. The students who are in the existing schools, by definition, test scores go down. Now you're looking at the teachers cross-eyed and the principal cross-eyed.
Wait. Hold on. Ray, you've got to let people finish. That's the only way this is going to work.
You're looking at the teachers and the students cross-eyed and the principals and saying that now this school is defective, it needs to close. And as a result of that, 6,000 teachers lost their jobs. And you may say that Vallis didn't do all of this, and he may not have done it all, but he certainly made a major contribution in this. And when you look at the schools in Chicago, scores of which had been closed, and thousands of teachers, of tenured teachers, having lost their jobs, and then you turn those buildings over to people who now operate with a profit incentive to redesign those schools and to bring less qualified teachers in, because you create the illusion somehow that the scores went down because of the inferiority of the teachers, rather than the fact you take the best students out of those schools and concentrated them in the other single schools. You've created a community dilemma. And so then other people who have no vested interest other than profit, for the most part, come in, redesign those schools, and bring in little white teachers who are trying to get past their student loans, whose only commitment is going to be to stay in those schools for 3 years and leave and go get a real job as they see themselves with their student debt forgiven. You've created an academic dilemma. So you may look better, but the students, as a superintendent, but the students themselves and the tenured teachers suffer. And that's why you have the such an intense approach to this campaign by the unionized teachers, because they understand that ultimately the consequences of this is going to be at their expense and the children's expense. And you've also taken that money which you've taken out of the tenured teachers' hands and transferred them to the police department, because you bring 1,000 more policemen in, and now you have to use that money to pay for their pensions and their overtime and their seniority. And again, it becomes an imbalanced system.
What are we? Is Dr. Reeves still there?
I don't even understand. Do I get a chance to respond to any of that?
Yes. Hold on. You talked a whole lot, Ray. Now, hold on. Now, don't act like I'm not going to. No, wait. Don't think that I'm not going to let you respond. Because you talked for several minutes. I timed it, which is fine.
I'm here, Santita.
Okay, but I have a panel here. Now, I mean, I'm not doing a one-on-one interview with you. I can do that. But the fact is, I have several people here. You sent me a text as a personal friend, and you said you wanted to jump in. And I responded, did I not?
You did.
Okay,
but,
then.
I mean,
No, there are no buts. I just have people here who have a point of view, and I want them to speak, and then we can have a conversation about this. We can't have it long because I got to go someplace else. But I want, okay, so you know what? Why don't you respond to what you heard from Mr. McKee, from Dwight McKee, and then Dr. Reeves, you can respond to what you've heard from everybody. And then we're going to begin to wrap this up. Okay?
Well, I don't know where to begin because he went into about 10 different
So did you.
But,
come on, Ray.
And you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts. First of all, charter schools are neighborhood schools. And Paul did not do charter schools in Chicago. He did them in New Orleans. And he did them in New Orleans because they were mandated. And it was the fastest way to get schools back online in New Orleans. So I'm not sure what charter schools in Chicago have to do with Paul Vallis. So he began his conversation on a falsehood, and then he took it somewhere else that ultimately implicated Paul. But first of all, it started off in the wrong direction.
Why was this a falsehood? Wait, because you're accusing him of not telling the truth. And wait, and indicting someone who's a regular guest on my show. I don't bring people on here who tell falsehoods. This is documented. There is no. I had G. Flip Taylor on here yesterday, who is part of a group of who's part of a group of lawyers, civil rights lawyers, and legal scholars and paralegals who have come out in support of Brandon Johnson, and they have footnoted the reasons. I mean, and I want you to read this because people know what happened under his leadership in New Orleans, and Reverend is always related to him, but Reverend Jackson will never support 100% charterization of public schools in New Orleans. Won't do it, and he did not do that.
We're talking about Chicago.
Huh?
We're talking about Chicago.
No. I'm just saying. No. You brought up Reverend Jackson going to New Orleans and blah blah. All these people are doing that, and wait a minute, and we all relate to each other personally. And while we relate to each other personally, we can also have profound policy disagreements. Many of you went to work for him. You went to work for him. Jeanette Wilson went to work for him. Doris Davenport went to work for him. Just because you work for Reverend and then work for him doesn't mean we're going to agree with the positions you take while you are with him. And that's all right. We're still going to be friends.
Those are your words, not mine.
No, clearly they're mine. They came out of my mouth. I'm just telling, and since I shut the door with my parents and really understand how they think, I'm just giving you a little bird's eye view into that. You're close to my parents, but I kind of shut the door and help to tuck them in at night. So this piece I get. So let's not get in, so I'm saying let's not go down that road. So I want you, but because when you say that he started off on a falsehood, Ray, that is not true.
He said that when he started talking about charter schools as being corporate entities, they're not. They're neighborhood schools. They actually are contractual schools that under the governance either of a school district or a university or the state. That's what they are.
And so are the vaccines, but the vaccines are big pharma, which they're corporatized. I mean, come on. You got to admit the corporations. Dick Durbin even said when we bailed out the banks in 2008, he said, quite frankly, the banks run this place. Everyone knows that our government is corporatized. Big business runs everything.
Of course, that's true. I never said that wasn't true.
Okay. No, I'm not putting anything in your mouth. I'm just making this point, and I want you to make your point.
I didn't say you're putting anything in my mouth.
Okay, then. Come on.
You're equivocating charter schools to big business.
No, I am, because that's what they do. That is what they are. Absolutely. And you know what? Charter schools and these vouchers came in to undo Brown versus Board of Education. That point you cannot refute. And wait a minute. And Professor Charles Ogletree, who cannot state his point right now because he's got dementia, has done extensive research on that. And most people who are in this space are very clear that the undermining of Brown v. versus Board of Education, charter schools and vouchers are part of that. Because these people did not want their children. Now, all of that matters. All of it does. Now, if you're telling me that Paul Vallis is a decent guy, and that is fine, you can say that. But he also helps to promote a corporate model, which does not help us, Ray. But when you start off saying that Dwight has made a point in which he has stated falsehoods, I got to say, wait a minute.
Well, he had.
Okay.
And I'll still go back to it.
And go on and make your point.
When in Chicago, where we are talking, which is what we're talking about, was that charter school. Paul did not create charter schools in Chicago or bring a host of charter schools in Chicago. I think we had maybe 14 at very most, and many of those were the alternative schools for students who had dropped out, were too old to attend the regular schools, and kids who were coming back from incarcerated situations. So, and in fact, the kids in the South, the group in the South Loop wanted a charter school because the kids from the Ickies were going to the South Loop's elementary school, and the gentrified community there wanted that school for themselves. And because they couldn't get the kids of the Ickies out of there, they asked for a charter school. Paul sent me there in my former job as community relations director. Not director, but I was working in community relations to manage that situation. And his word was, I'm not building them a charter school because there is many more. The South Loop School is under-enrolled. And unless that school was at capacity, there's no need for a new school. And he did not build them a charter school. And that's the precise situation that people are suggesting that the opposite. There's a group of white citizens there who wanted that school for themselves and couldn't get it and then asked for a charter school, and he denied them a charter school. Now, those are facts.
No, I mean, I've seen that, but you know, the sad thing is this way. Many of us, because we know so little about the education system, we think that anything that's not public is superior. I have a friend who told me when we were growing up, she was in Catholic school. She said, well, you know, I got a B, but you know, that's an A in public schools. That was the most ignorant thing I'd ever heard in my life because it was just not true. It's just ridiculous. But, you know, we think that all private schools are superior to public schools. Not just many people do, and it's just not true. And
of course, that's not true.
Yeah, I'm not asserting that you're saying anything else. I'm telling you about my own experience with a very dear friend who would tell me that. And I'm like, no, you got a B or you got a C, and that's it. But Dwight, do you want to respond to Ray? I love y'all, but I'm gonna have to go a minute.
The doctor.
Dr. Reeves, okay, Dr. Reeves.
So I just have a question because I'm very confused. If we have charter schools and you're saying charter schools are in communities, they're community schools, why didn't they just leave the traditional high schools or the traditional elementary schools or the traditional middle schools and fund those schools with the programs that are now being funded by the charter schools? Because if you're telling me they're community schools, of course they're going to be in communities, but in what communities are these schools placed? And how many kids are limited in those communities from attending those very charter schools are community schools? So you have to understand that education that was originally free and traditional had no limitations on the students that came through their doors. So you can't then say, well, because you have a charter school in a community, that it's opening its doors to every child, because it does not. Otherwise, you don't need vouchers. There's no reason for you to have vouchers, okay? So when I hear people talking about charter schools as if there's no corporate involvement, I take issue, because there is extreme corporate involvement.
And to be fair, so that you know who Dr. Reeves is, she teaches at the City University of New York and in the New York Public Schools, and she's a union leader. So, just so that you know.
So, you know, and I'm not fighting and running for mayor in Chicago. I am 100% at every single time, every time I wake up and every time I go to sleep, I'm thinking about my children, my students, okay? And when I'm looking at school systems across America where they're limiting access to special needs kids, and they're limiting access to some black and brown kids in some communities, where when I go into some of those schools, they don't have full access to technology, they don't have full access to books, they don't have full access to the bare utensils that they need in order to be educated properly, I take issue. When I go into a charter school and I see a charter school getting adequate funding to provide these things for students who come through their doors, guess what? I'm wondering why, since they're community schools, since they're public schools, that funding wasn't put into the traditional schools that did not limit access. So when you're saying to me it's not corporate run, and before I say anything about Paul Vallis, I'm talking about education, right? That's what I'm talking about first. Now, you mentioned something about Mr. Vallis being hired by mayors across. Haiti does not have a mayor.
Didn't I say that?
No, I'm just saying. You said that it wasn't corporate. You said Mr. McKee made statements, right? And, you know, there were statements made about him only being hired by mayors. So let me just say this. The SRC, the School Reform Commission, is not the mayor. The mayor of Philadelphia lost control of his school, period. The state took it over. The governor put in place the SRC, the School Reform Commission. And when that governor put that committee in place, that organization in place, no, I listened to you, sir. I listened to you. In all fairness. I listened to you. And I'm not speaking for or against any candidate. I'm just simply saying to you that I listened to what you were saying. The SRC was put in place by the governor. The mayor was given an opportunity to appoint 2 people to that commission, but the governor put in the majority of the people there. It was not the mayor, nor was it the school board that put Paul Vallis in that position. It was not. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, I'm going to ride with you and say he was not hired. I'm just going to say he was not hired by the corporate entity. Okay, so
Ray, stop that.
Sir.
Now, because when you came on, wait a minute, I let you give a long opening statement.
Not put words in my mouth.
No,
you cannot put words in my mouth.
No, but Ray, stop. Just stop. Because we can disagree without being disagreeable. And that is what we're going to do. No, she's not. And then you will have an opportunity to stop it. You will have an opportunity to respond. But the way that I do, we're not having a conversation over my parents' table. We're on the Santita Jackson show, and I handle things. I roll a particular way here. And it's either that or I'm going to have you go. No, that's it. That's it. Let her finish, and then you respond. That's it.
I'm not seeing how your words are being twisted when you said in those positions he was not hired by corporate entities. I'm saying to you that I'm giving you facts, I'm giving you data, and I'm giving you information. I do understand your position. I'm saying to you, made the statement that he was not hired by corporate, and I'm asking you, if he was not, okay, in Philadelphia, the SRC was not put in place by the mayor. As a matter of fact, when he went into Philadelphia, the school system was taken over by the state. It was taken over by the state. The governor put the majority of the people on that commission in place. There was no school board. There was no mayor who now had a say-so as to what was going to happen with the school system there. But during that time, there were 30,000 kids who dropped out of school. Okay? And I hear what you're saying, because if we're going to talk about charter versus traditional, that's a separate conversation. If you're going to talk about Paul Vallis and his record, that's a separate conversation. I started on the difference between charter and traditional, and you cannot say that charter schools are not run by or funded by corporate entities, because it is a fact. Whether or not they're in communities, in your mind, whether or not they're in communities, okay, those schools are controlled by, funded by, whether partially or fully, by corporate entities. Whenever a school system limits students and has the ability to limit students from coming in, it is not public 100% schools. It cannot be 100% public schools. Public schools cannot and should not limit students from attending. Traditional public schools did not limit students from attending.
Can I say something? I don't know how we pivoted from talking about Paul Vallis' record to talking about charter schools, because that's not what I came on to talk about. And
You mentioned it,
honey. You brought it up. I'll send. All you have to do is look. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. All you have to do. Oh, yes, you did. All you have to do is look at the Facebook playback of this. No. Go to YouTube. Go to YouTube. Listen to yourself, Ray. I do this every day, honey. All you have to do is go to YouTube to the Santita. Now stop. Go to the Santita Jackson show. So no, don't do that to me now. Now watch out. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that.
I mean,
no. I'm going to allow you to finish. But what you're going to do is be respectful, Ray. And what I've tried to do is let everyone, including you, make full statements. Now, you did mention these other entities, and that's why these people have brought them up. They're responding to what you said, and sometimes we can be speaking so fast and you have so much information because you've worked for them for a long time. And you've worked in the education space as a lobbyist for a long time, that sometimes you don't hear all that you say. And sometimes when you hear the playback on a tape, you'll go, oh, I didn't realize I said that. These are things that you did say, which is why they were responded to. So now, Ray, because it is now, I've gone over an hour and I've got some other things I need to do today. And I will have you back on the show. But one thing, when you're on the show, you'll be on a panel, so you'll be part of a discussion and no one gets rolled over here. Your point, Ray.
And I appreciate that. And let me just say this. If we have a topic that we're discussing, I don't know how it pivots into another topic, but nevertheless.
It didn't pivot into another topic, Ray. Nothing pivoted into another topic. You mentioned something, and then because all this, when you talk about Paul Vallis, all of these things come up. Like, okay, the lawyers and legal workers for Brandon Johnson, they talk about securing resources for violence prevention, eliminating the gang database, but then they also go into what he did in Philadelphia. There are G2 Brown, a renowned activist here. There are parents from Bridgeport, Connecticut, from New Orleans, from all over the country who are traveling and who have traveled here, and they have said, and we've had agent provocateurs paid by the FBI and other entities, and and people who support Paul Vallis, and they have said, look, what he did, and all these people have the same story. What he did when he was the head of our school system destroyed the system, destroyed our kids.
You can go look at the data.
They're looking at data too, and they're looking at their children. But I want you to respond to what you just heard.
You just gave a position that's absolutely not true.
Absolutely. No. I challenge you on that. I'm telling you what these people came on my show and said, no, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm not going to let you do that because I would not be on the air if I trafficked in untruths, Ray. Don't play with me. And do not assault my integrity. I do not get up at 2 o'clock wait a minute. I get about 3 hours. No, you wait 1 minute. I get about 3 hours of sleep every night, trying to get it right, getting facts. Because for a whole lot of reasons, I am tracked no, you wait 1 minute. I am tracked every single day. And if I do not get it right, and if I do not, you wait 1 minute. If I don't get it right, if I tell lies, I am off the air. So don't you dare come at me telling me that I traffic in falsehoods. Don't you do it. I won't have it. I won't have it, and I will not have you back here if you do that, if you level that charge at me, because that is an attack upon my integrity, and I will not tolerate that.
That is not what I did.
Yes, it was. Now, you make your point, because we've got to wrap this up.
I said that state data will determine for a fact what he did in New Orleans. You said, someone said...
I didn't say someone. I said there are a group of parents coming out of New Orleans and academics, if you let me finish. Because what we need to do, what you can do, and what I will do for you, is get these parents together so that you can speak with them. Because you know what? I don't want to fix the blame. I want to fix the problem. Because I have no doubt, because you are a father yourself, that you want your child to be educated well, and you want the people around your son to be well educated. I think that, and I believe that. That having been said, you need to talk to some of these parents who have gotten on the road and who are very, very upset, who feel betrayed. Now, if you would speak to them and not speak around them or about them, then maybe we could get somewhere. Because you can say, this is where you were misinformed, and they can say, this is where you were misinformed, and then we can get the story right.
We don't have to
Now,
do all that. All we have to look at
No, because I believe in talking to people. I ain't got no problem talking to someone with whom I'm in disagreement. But I want you to make your closing comment, because Ray, everything ended an hour ago. People are still here, and that's fine.
Again, the point I wanted to make is the data doesn't lie. You don't have to go back and talk. You don't have to speculate about it. You don't have to all you have to do is look at the state data. It's a public document. You can go on the State Board of Education's website. You can go to the National Center for Education Statistics and find out. You can find out everything that happened regarding test scores and graduation rates and so forth during the era of Paul Vallis' time in any district he was in, and determine if he left the schools better than he found them. It's simple as that. The data is there. It's public.
I'll read to you from this endorsement from these teachers. Oh, but I want you to finish first. Excuse me.
Again, the National Center for Education Statistics is the government. Their school districts are required to report their data. So if it's true, it's there. If it's there, it's irrefutable. And so we don't even have to speculate about what Paul Vallis did anywhere.
We're not speculating anything.
The data does not tell the whole story, Ray. That's why I use that example of the NBA. Is that if you put all of the best players on one team, the data will tell you that all the statistics went up. The assists went up. The rebounds went up. The three-point shots went up. Is because you have all of the best players on one team. So the data
Can I just say that when school districts provide data, since you want to say it's accurate, they can provide you with any data they choose. However, how about you go to CRDC? That is a government entity. They do their own research. So when you're saying, the statistics are there, school districts provide their own data. They can hide any data they want. They can skew any data they want. But go to CRDC. Go to those documents. Go to scholarly research that speaks on school systems. Sir, I was not speaking over you. Please do not try to speak over me. That's all I'm saying. When you're talking about data, I know about data. And the sources that you're mentioning, if you're getting data from a source like a school system, they can put anything in that data that they choose to.
Not to mention the fact that Dr. Reeves
is data, there would be no need for CRDC.
And Dr. Reeves is teaching in the schools, Ray. I mean, she's teaching it at the university level, and she's teaching it in the public schools in New York. She gets our kids through high school and into and through college. And she is also a union leader. So I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to give their closing thoughts. And so let me start with you, Dr. Reeves, then you, Ray, then you, Dwight, and then we are going to get out of here. I love you all to pieces, but I got something else I got to do.
Santita, I want to thank you for having me on your show today. Always a pleasure. I just want everyone to ensure that they educate themselves on all the information that's necessary, whether it has to do with politics in this election or anything that has to do with education. It is absolutely necessary that our focus are on not just the best of us, but the least of us and those in between. We have very broken systems in this country. We want to ensure that when we have leadership in place, they're not trying to brush some under the rug and fortify others that only benefit a chosen few in this country. We need to ensure that we're putting in people, in systems, and in places that are going to do for everyone, not just for some. I want everyone to be mindful of their choices because it does affect our children far more greatly than it affects the adults who are leaving those children behind. That's all I have to say.
Okay, Ray?
I just want to say that I called on this line to talk about, to clarify some issues about Paul Vallis, which I know his record has been tarnished and equivocated, exaggerated, and fabricated about things that just have not been true. I was there to experience them all, and I have a story that I can that will rebut many of the misconceptions about his leadership style, his interest in the poor.
Before you go, give us, smash some of the misperceptions we have of him. Just give it to us in a nutshell.
Okay. One of them is that he has sliced off the cream of the crop in the school districts he's been in and left the poorest children behind. That's not true. He's created options for. As a matter of fact, he's done quite the opposite. And I can go, but it requires me to go into some details, specifics, in order for me to make that point. For example, going to Washington and arguing to modify the Title I funding formula, to put the funding out of the four grants that fund Title I, of which the most targeted to poor children was not funded. He argued with your brother, Congressman Jackson, through the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, which he sat on, to put the new funding into the Targeted Assistance Grant, which brought back billions of dollars to the poorest district and Chicago, millions of Chicago. But he's done things of that sort. And I could go on and name 10 others. Reclassifying, consolidating all the categorical grants in Chicago, for Chicago Public Schools into two, special ed and general ed, and taking $128 million and putting them back into the classroom, hiring reading paraprofessionals for the early learning critical grades so those kids can be brought up to speed, and then financing the largest after-school and summer school program in the history of the nation, and then going to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and having all those schools classified as daycare centers so they could provide a third meal. So by keeping those children in the evening, it was not just keeping them for more time on task, but also feeding them. What Paul Vallis did for poor children is the heart and soul of what Lyndon Johnson meant in his Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and what he meant in the war on poverty, and the capital improvement plan. 55% minority set aside infused into poor and underserved communities, a multi-billion-dollar project, which he required local hiring and required in the contract that those contractors hire parents from the schools. That's as good as anything. That's an infusion of capital close to the President Roosevelt's WPA program. I mean, he has done things that demonstrate that he is probably the police contract. The most progressive part of it was the meeting the reforms of the city council, and not just the consent decree, but the things he put in beyond the consent decree that were the requests of the reform community. That is the most progressive contract holding police accountable of any city in the nation.
Then, can I respond to all of this, Santita?
Yeah, no, your closing thought. I'm waiting, but hold on. Had you
Ray?
concluded? One moment, Dwight. Have you
Will you finish,
concluded
Ray?
what you were going to say, Ray?
I just want to, in conclusion, the idea that Paul is backed by some nefarious corporate interests, the fact that he is a right winger or Republican or this guy, what they call a dino and all that kind of stuff, it's a further thing from the truth. And it's evident in the things that I just mentioned, which you can look at the empirical data, and you can go back and see where that those are verifiable.
Then why are the right wingers so excited about him, Ray? Why is the Fraternal Order of Police? So if he is locked into the consent decree like that, then why is the Fraternal Order of Police so excited about him? Why are the mega crowd so excited about him? If that's the case, not saying he is that, but it is saying that he has the endorsement of all of that. It seems to be a little inconsistent to me. I'm not impugning your motives or Vallis's motives. I think both of you all may be very sincere, Ray. I'm saying that sometimes there are unintended consequences to even if you think you're taking the right position. Somebody can pay you a compliment, and if they have COVID, and you end up getting COVID, even though they're not cursing you, they're complimenting you, the breath is the same. And the unintended consequences are things that you didn't expect to come out of your behavior. And I'm saying to you that even if he is well-intentioned, the unintended consequences has been devastating to some people, and those are the people Santita is talking about who have come and testified to their experience to say that even if he had the best intentions, his behaviors were devastating to our educational system and our children. Even if you talk about hiring 1,000 policemen and you have the best intention to suppress crime, if 10% of those policemen have been shown to be racist and oppressive, then the unintended consequences of that is going to be more shootings and more stop and frisk and more oppression by the policemen, even though your intentions was to suppress crime. If you are putting in the 1,000 of the police that you had before, and 10% or 20% of them have demonstrated themselves to be racist, or part of the Proud Boys, or part of the right wing, then they themselves will impose their own behavior independent of what your motives were in that situation. You have to really be careful of what you ask for, because sometimes you can get it to your detriment, Ray. And it's always saying is Paul Vallis may be a good guy, like I think you a good guy. But when you look at the results of a lot of the behavior that he's been involved with, it's resulted in some very serious consequences for the black community.
And I will say this, I'm glad that things got a little testy today, because I think that we're all friends here. And this campaign and this moment in time is fraught with a lot of division. And whoever wins on April 4th, or whenever the winner is determined and announced, they're going to need each other. I mean, that's the beauty of this. They are truly going to have to reconcile in order to heal the city. Because they didn't drive the wedge in the city. The wedge was there. It's just cracking open, because that is these are the times in which we live. More and more people don't have enough. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough money. There are more days than there are money to pay for the days in the month. People are struggling out here. People have had their life's options reduced, if not outright eliminated. Now people are using credit cards. They're using Afterpay to pay for their groceries. I saw that on CNN this morning. I mean, really? Afterpay? And so if you miss a payment in 6 weeks, that means you can't get any more groceries. That's how tight it is out here. So when you hear all of this passion is coming from a very real place because people are struggling. And Ray, I'm not impugning your motives. I know that you mean well. I'm not impugning your motives or questioning you, Dr. Reeves, or Dwight, or anyone here. But I beg of you that we learn to disagree without being disagreeable and not make any of this personal. For me, this is not personal. I know Paul Vallis, as you heard him say, please call me Paul Santita, really? Out of respect. I know him. I know Commissioner Johnson and can be on a first-name basis with them. I choose not to do that on the air because I want them to be respected. I know President Obama. In public, he's President Obama. In private, that's a whole different matter. You know, my own daddy is Reverend, but I'm speaking of the institutional Reverend Jackson. But when he's up close and personal, he will not respond to me when I call him Reverend, because I'm his daddy, and he's going to tell me that. He hates to hear me call him daddy anyway, but that's Reverend, but that's a different story. So I'm just saying, whatever we do, you know how I try to roll on this show. What I want to do is we do not have a fact-free zone. You got to come with the facts. You got to come with the receipts. That's why I don't sleep a lot at all, because I am digging for information. And I have a very, very well-researched show, and I'm the one who's doing it. And then I get research from other people, and then I research their research. So this is not this. I am too seasoned in politics. I am too seasoned in this space to be emotional about this. What makes me emotional is having people come by push hungry. What makes me emotional is having people come by push, having interns come there and, we order lunch because my father says, you don't know where people are coming from. And there was one young man, Ray and Dwight and Dr. Reeves, who would not eat his lunch. Finally, Reverend Wilson said, young man, why are you not eating? Oh, no, I'm not hungry. She said, but son, you've been here all day. All day. And you haven't eaten. Well, it turned out he didn't have any food at home. So he was taking the lunch that he got at Push home so his family could eat. See, this is what I see all the time. See, I'm not around folks who got jobs all the time. Oh, no. I'm around people who are struggling. And because the people who are struggling for all that God has lifted the Jacksons up to do, God also keeps us anchored in you. So that I can go to the Vatican and I can go to the storefront church, and my father will tell me, now, the Vatican is nice, but remember where we live. We live over here in the storefront church. So let us make a decision about the kind of city, the kind of state, the kind of country, the kind of world that we want. If you listen to the Lord's Prayer, it says it all. We can have what exists in heaven if we would change our minds and make it real on earth. It just takes a shift in consciousness, an elevation in consciousness. No one is going after it, at least not on this show. And I don't think that Mr. Vallis would come here if he felt that he were walking into a situation where I were attacking him or some kind of ambush. He knows I don't play that. He knows I would never do that to him. I don't want to do that. I've seen people do that to Reverend, and I don't like it. I've been talked down to. I've been talked over. I don't like it. That's why I try to conduct this show this particular way, and I am not going to stop. So either we're going to stand up and get our children educated. We need a constitutional amendment so that our children can have the constitutional right, the federally protected right to be educated. So they will not have to be like those kids in Detroit and all over the country who are being graduated, functionally illiterate, and being sent to college and finding out that they cannot read. So there's a group of kids who are suing the Detroit public school system because they said, I have a right to read, but you have not taught me to read. But the fact is, sadly, there is no right in the Constitution for you to read. If that goes to the Supreme Court, and I hope it does, that is what's going to happen. Scalia was right. You don't have a federally protected right to vote. You don't have it. So we've got to make some decisions about who we are and what it is that we want. Being an American and being in America, and America is an evolving idea and concept. It is not a democracy. It is a constitutional republic that came out of a constitutional monarchy, and it has democratic accents. Now we have to make a decision about what it is that we want. And more than that, before we get to what we want, you better get what you need. You need to eat your vegetables and your protein first before you get your dessert. Come on now. So we've talked a long time today, but I hope that this conversation is not falling on deaf ears. I repeat, I don't let people come on here with falsehoods. Don't let that happen. If I let that happen, Dwight and Ray and Dr. Reeves, I've told you, the politics of being on the air far outweigh what happens just getting on the air. No, I can't afford that. These people would tear me apart. Some footage from my show is already being used in an attack ad on Brandon Johnson. He said this on the Santita Jackson show, and they put it out there. Okay. So, Cecilia, thank you so much. But, you don't have to thank me. If God put me in this space, and, I just want to do God's will, and I want to do it God's way, more than that. And I promise you to let Ray and Dwight and Dr. Reeves speak. That having been said, it's going to be done respectfully. We're going to speak to each other, and you're right. You're entitled to your opinions, but not your own set of facts. That's why we bring the facts here. That's why we're not trying to fix the blame here. We're trying to fix the problem. That's why I was glad that Mr. Vallis went on and continued to speak. And he, as you heard him say, he will be back here. Because I want this right. If he has governed improperly before, if he becomes mayor, I want him to govern properly going forward. I didn't ask him to condemn the head of the police union. No, I wasn't going to ask him to do that. I'm not in the condemnation business. But to let him know that his comments and having a board that has no black people on it, that's unacceptable, I expect him to do that when he's mayor, because that's fair. I knew Fred Hampton, met him several times, and it was traumatizing to me as a 6-year-old to get up one morning on my way to school and find out that he had been murdered. So many people I know have been murdered by the police and others, and by the police state. I'm sick of it. I want America to be just and right and fair. That's what I want. That's what I'm fighting for. And I'm not going to fight you. I'm going to fight for that. Come on, people. Let's grow up in our politics. Disagree without being disagreeable, and let's talk with each other, not at each other, not over each other, around each other. Let's talk to each other. Let's talk with each other, and let us work together and make this world right. I love you, everybody. Love you, Ray. Love you, Dwight. Love you, Dr. Reeves. Love you, Alex. Love all of you, my morning stars. I just love you, love you, love you, love you. And so, that's right. That's right, my Latino voice, Yvonne. She said, mi gente, my people. That's right. There it is. Let's go on and do that. I love you, love you, love you. I'm out. God bless you. See you tomorrow on this end. Yes, Dwight?
No, that was me, Ray. I was saying we love you, too. I look forward to having more discussions with you.
Absolutely. It ain't going to be... Well,